Part 45. Infinite Script Killing. Author, Guo Shui Gan Xiao. Chapter 458. Fanjing Mountain, formerly known as Sangwu, is located in Tongran City, GZ Province, and is named Brahma Pure Land. Fanjing Mountain is the source of Wuling, the ancestral hall of famous mountains, and the famous ashram of Maitreya Bodhisattva. It is a famous Buddhist mountain in China, as famous as Mount Wutai in Shaanxi, Mount Puchuo in Zhejiang, Mount Yimei in Sichuan, and Mount Zhuhua in Anhui. On the bus, the guide enthusiastically introduced this attraction to everyone. During the Yuan, Ming, and Qing dynasties, the Wuling mountain area, like most areas in southwest China, was full of toasts. There was even a popular saying that a century-old dynasty, 1,000-year chieftains. It was not until the founding of New China that this phenomenon was ended. Now we can only see some of the buildings left over from that time can give you a sense of the dynasty that once upon a time was a world filled with chieftains. In the car, Gao Zhou grinned unconsciously and whispered in Su Tong's ear, "If my family could be put in the past, they would be the high priests and the chieftains would be obedient." Su Tongbei glanced at him and sneered, "Come on, you're not afraid that the seedling will pop out and kill you with a slap." At this time, the guide came over and handed out promotional brochures to everyone. When he saw the two of them whispering, he smiled and asked, "Why are you talking so happily?" The guide is a girl in her early 20s, with an oval face and a small nose, but her eyes are very big. When she smiles, a small dimple will appear on her face. She is very lively and cute. Su Tong glanced at the name on the sign on her chest. "Dani, are you from the Miao ethnic group?" Dai surnames are rare, but there are many in western Hunan, because many local Miao people have this surname. Dai Ni nodded, "Yes, this is my name." Miao people generally have two names, a Chinese name and a Miao name. Miao people from various places have certain differences in their names. For example, in the southeastern Guizhou region, the continuous name system is implemented, that is, the name of the grandfather or father is added to one's own name, and some even add both. The Miao people in western Hunan, northeastern Guizhou and middle Guizhou do not use the son, daughter, father-to-father naming system, but use names exclusively for patrilineal families. However, for the sake of convenience, few Miao people still use the original old system. "Oh, Connie, do you often run this line?" As soon as Gao Zhou heard that the other party was from the Miao ethnic group, he immediately inquired curiously. After getting confirmation from Connie, he pretended to be a curious baby and asked, "So you are very familiar with the Nanling Mountains?" "We have heard of a person named the Black Wind Pond is just east of the Nanling Mountains, have you heard of it?" Black Wind Pond. Connie thought for a moment, smiled and shook her head, "I really don't know about this. The Nanling Mountains are so big that they can even connect to the two lakes in the east. I have never heard of Black Wind Pond in such a big place." After saying that, he looked at them curiously, "Aren't you fellow travelers?" Gao Zhou did not deny it, but pointed to Su Tong aside, "Do you think we look alike?" Connie looked at Su Tong and Gao Zhou carefully and said with a smile, "It really doesn't look like that. I have seen those travel friends who are much stronger than you, and I have never seen travel friends who go out without bringing anything with them." After finishing speaking, Connie continued, "It doesn't matter if you are not a traveler. Recently, there have been repeated orders in the mountains that travelers are not allowed to explore the mountain. Not long ago, 7 travelers entered the mountain, but no one has been found until now." "Oh, you are talking about the Dabao expedition team." Several passengers on the side became energetic when they heard this. Yes, it's them. I saw the news yesterday. They are really a group of young people who are desperate for their lives. They run into the ravine to do live broadcasts and are looking for some ghost village. Now it's better. There's nothing to cause trouble. Come. They were all well fed. The rescue team searched the mountains for 5 or 6 days but could not find any of them. It is said that 2 of them were sacrificed. People can enter the mountains casually. When mentioning the word Alice friend, it is obvious that most people have a negative attitude towards it. In fact, this is not surprising. Even if professionals enter the mountains, it is difficult to guarantee absolute safety in the face of emergencies. What's more, after all, there are only a few professional teams, and most of them are improvised teams. Every year, people can see a lot of things about the disappearance of travel friends on the internet. The most annoying thing is some idiots who claim to be friends. After watching survival programs for 2 days, they think they can do it too. They sneaked into no man's land without listening to dissuasion. In the end, the local area had to organize a large amount of manpower and material resources to search, and some search teams even suffered casualties. And what about those rescued travel companions? Haha, most of them have disappeared, as if these things have nothing to do with them. It is precisely because of these scum that some local scenic spots now have a headache when they hear about the travel adventure team. Just like the one called Davao Expedition Team being discussed in the car at this moment, it belongs to the latter. Wuling Mountain is now under martial law. The mountain patrol team searched day and night, but unfortunately no one was found. Su Tong and Gao Zhou naturally saw this news before setting off. The two were joking at the time, asking if they could meet them in the mountains and rescue them. But when the two of them were about to enter the mountain, they discovered that many mountain roads had been blocked by people appointed by the village committee, just to avoid the fear of another reckless person entering the mountain. Normally, these villagers couldn't stop the two of them, but because the search team joined in, they were even equipped with drones. Seeing the 2 college students in the village flying around with the drones, Su Tong and Gao Zhou could only wait for a while. I scolded the street and took a bus straight to the scenic spot, planning to climb over the mountain from an inconspicuous corner of the scenic spot. On the one hand, the distance will be closer, and on the other hand, we hope to avoid those search teams. When the car arrived at the parking lot, the two of them followed the tour group up the mountain leisurely. The scenic spot has been developed very maturely, and there are basically resting places along the way. Su Tong noticed that most of the shops that opened shops here were Miao or Tajia people. He even saw some Miao people selling herbal medicines carrying some unusual auras, but these auras were too weak to be noticed without careful consideration. Connie also enthusiastically told them the stories of the many Miao people in western Hunan. When Gao Zhou asked casually about the seedlings, Connie thought for a moment, there are very few now. There may be a few in the mountains, but few people have seen them. Instead of taking the cable car, Su and Tong walked along the mountain road. There were no traces of artificial carvings on the various strange-shaped rocks along the way. They were completely the miraculous workmanship of nature. Considering their physical constitution, they did not feel tired at all. Not even a drop of sweat broke out, which made Connie's impression of the two of them change a lot. Regarding the matter of Yin Yang Cave, the two of them were not worried for a while. After all, there were search teams everywhere in the mountains. They were all here anyway, so they just treated it as a visit to experience the local customs. Ahead is the old Golden Dome, everyone, please pay attention to your steps. Su Tong raised his head and looked up. A rugged and vertical stone staircase stretched upward like a long worm. At this time, he suddenly had a very strange feeling. He couldn't tell what was wrong, as if there was a very magical power around him, but this power was vague and indistinct. Thinking of this, Su Tong simply activated the Life I Chi section. As the Life I Chi sect was activated, the color of the mountains and forests in front of them receded. In this black and white world, they saw a strange light of 3 different colors surrounding the clouds above their heads. Superior. Huh. Seeing this, Su Tong couldn't help but be a little surprised. These 3 colors of light, one red, one gold, and one green, are incompatible with each other. What's wrong? Seeing that he was not leaving, Gao Zhou couldn't help asking. Su Tong observed for a moment and took out the Bagua Tianji compass from the prop book. The last time I went to see the master, the compass was appraised by the master himself. Bagua Tianji compass. If there is too much entanglement, you are not allowed to go outside the mountain. It can be used as a water mouth in the long distance. If the escort is perfect, it is rare to have both wealth and wealth. Active skill 1, Dragon Shaking Needle. It consumes 30 script points. After activation, you can see the yin and yang feng shui of mountains and rivers, the 8 diagrams and the changes in the 9 palaces. You can seek good luck and avoid bad luck, and everything will go well. Cooling time, 10 minutes. Note, the results of this deduction can only be used as a reference if there is any discrepancy, no refund will be given. This compass is very unique. Most other compasses are round. It is square on the outside and round on the inside. In the words of Master Shuigui, this is called a round sky and a round place. The compass is not fixed. There are 3 rings inside that can be rotated, representing the numbers of heaven, door, and earth. The sky represents the 9 stars, the door represents the 8 trigrams, and the earth represents the 8 directions. In addition, the 12 heavenly stems in the plate correspond to the time, and the 2 colors in the plate represent yin and yang, that is, the sky plate and the earth. The superposition of this is the so-called 24 mountain plates in Feng Shui. This is reflected in a certain movie. The protagonist often chants the phrase "look for the dragon and look at the winding mountain." One entanglement is another level of past the entangling mountain in it refers to the direction on the compass. I'm not really asking you to look at the mountains. After all, where did the mountains come from in the ancient tomb? I have to say that the price of using this compass once is really expensive. No wonder those Feng Shui masters all make a lot of money. Their faith is really priceless. Of course, their faith is priceless, but in Su Tong's case it has become a clear price tag. As the compass ability was activated, the pointer on it also began to rotate. At this time, Su Tong unexpectedly discovered that his life icon began to show strange lines as the pointer on the compass rotated. It seems that the magical power of the Minjian Kimen has yet to be developed. The pointer is getting faster and faster, the compass makes a clicking sound, and the ring representing the 3 numbers of heaven, door, and earth also rotates. The picture seen by Minjian Kimen is also clearer. Finally, when the pointer on the compass stopped, in the world of Minjian Kimen, a path shone with splendor, seeming to guide him along this path. Looking at the result on the compass again, it was almost pointing in the same direction as the path seen by Kimen with his life eye. Su Tong's eyes lit up. He looked left and right and saw that his guide Connie was already walking in front. He pulled Gao Zhou towards another road. Infinite Script Killing. Author, Guo Shui Gan Xiao. Chapter 459. Fanjing Mountain is one of the 21 caves. Therefore, the lower part is added to make it flat, the higher part is lowered, and it is changed to Jiaxiang. It is the place with the first 5 tones. The 9 locks and 3 immortals can be said to be amazing. Gao Zhou held the book Lingling Yin Yang Feng Shui map and found Fanjingshan's annotations, and read while walking. This short sentence contains several Feng Shui terms. If Su Tong hadn't studied the number of plum blossoms and gained some knowledge along the way, he really wouldn't be able to understand it. The so-called direction is 70 degrees east-northeast, which means purple air coming from the east. 9 locks means to go around the bay and loop around, with many locks to prevent the energy from draining. The 3 immortals refer to the 3 unique golden domes. Being able to give such a high evaluation on the Lingling Yin and Yang Feng Shui diagram shows the inherent peculiarity of Fanjing Mountain. Of course, this is the same as the result he calculated using the Minjian Kimen and Bagua Tianji compass. The 2-phase confirmation also gave Su Tong some special gains. The mountain road in front of us was rugged and the muddy ground was slippery. After a while, the road disappeared and we could only vaguely see the traces of wild beasts. If you step on those gravels, they will slide down a large area. If you are not careful, you may fall off the cliff. Fortunately, Su Tong and Gao Zhou were not ordinary people. Not only did they not retreat because of the difficulty of the road, but because there were no people around them, their steps were incredibly agile. I saw Su Tong jumping up in a vigorous step, with one hand only as thick as a chopstick, swinging lightly 5 or 6 meters away from the tree trunk. Gao Zhou was not so exaggerated, but it was not much different. If this scene is seen by someone, some mysterious incident will inevitably happen. But to digress, it seems that there are quite a lot of mysterious events in Xiangxi. When the two were walking through a forest, Gao Zhou's eyes suddenly lit up and he saw 2 golden monkeys on the tree. It has golden hair, a blue face, nostrils pointing upward, a protruding mouth, and a tail as long as its body. It looks really cute. Different from the perverse temperament of the macaques in Mount Imei, these 2 golden monkeys squatted in the tree, facing the 2 humans who suddenly broke in, just watching curiously, and even did not forget to help their companions comb their hair. Even though Gao Zhou is from Xiangxi, he lives in seclusion on weekdays. This is his first time to visit Mount Fanjing, and it is also his first time to see the specialty of his hometown, the national treasure golden monkey. He can't help but look at it more. Hey, don't say it, a national treasure is a national treasure. When I went to Mount Imei that year, those monkey thieves actually threw stones at me. I almost couldn't help but kill them all with a knife. Bah, what a bunch of thieves, no. It's a tricky monkey. Compared with the unpleasant experiences in Mount Imei, the golden monkey in front of me is worthy of being a noble among monkeys. Not only is it good looking, but it is also particularly docile. Su Tong took a look and said, compared with the murderous monkeys in the third script world, the golden monkey in front of him was as well behaved as a little princess. Especially the smaller golden monkey, with a bunch of flame-patterned golden hair on its white chest, looks quite unique. Gao Zhou took out 2 apples from the prop book, shook them in his hand, and then tossed them gently. The 2 golden monkeys actually caught them steadily, holding the fruits and chewing them into their mouth slowly. He looks better when he eats than those tricky monkeys. The 2 watched the golden monkey for a while and then continued on their way. The road behind them was almost entirely walking through the gap on the edge of the cliff. During this period, Gao Zhou almost missed the point with his foot, but fortunately Su Tong caught him, otherwise he would have been choked if he fell. After climbing down the cliff, what they saw was not the glorious palace they imagined, but instead a piece of ruins. It is surrounded by walls made of stones, but now they are only half a person tall. When I looked inside, I saw a Buddha statue enshrined inside. That's it? Gao Zhou looked around and saw that this ghost place had been abandoned for who knows how many years. He pushed aside the weeds and took a closer look. He could also see some damaged pagodas. In fact, this place is not bad. It is hidden between the mountains on both sides. There is a concave flat land in the middle of the mountainside. The mountains and forests on both sides are dense, but they do not block the light at all. In addition, it faces the east and can see the mountains at the foot of the mountain. This time, I don't need feng shui to observe it, and I think this place is good. There is also a spring here. Gao Zhou looked at the clear spring flowing out from the cracks in the rocks in front of him and onto the stone path below. He could conclude that there were indeed people living in this place in the past. He took a mouthful of mountain spring and drank it. The mountain spring was clear and sweet. It was very cool and quenched his thirst when he drank it. He couldn't help but take a few more sips. This is a rare and good place. If it is developed, it will definitely be a popular attraction. Su Tong walked into the temple, which had already been stripped of its walls, and saw a monk enshrined on the altar table. But strangely, the monk was covering his mouth. This is the first time I have seen such a strange statue. Could it be that this monk also practices closed-mouth meditation? Just when Su Tong was puzzled, De Ya's voice came from the entrance of the hall, and De Ya turned into a woman's clothes, holding Fa Cai in her arms, sitting on the door rail and watching. Headmaster, I know this. When I was a child, I heard my grandma say that a monk covering his mouth means the same word, enlightenment. De Ya raised her little face and became proud. The reason why she knew so clearly was because her grandma also tested herself in this way. Cover and enlightenment, this is a classic Zen koan from the Northern Song dynasty. The general meaning of the story is that the little monk asked the master why he didn't teach him anything. The master suddenly covered his mouth, and the little monk became enlightened. Later, this young monk became Zen master Chu Yuan, who was famous for his Zen style in the Northern Song dynasty, and his influence was far-reaching. Wu, wu. Su Tong looked at the monk when he heard this. After muttering for a while, he turned around and called Gao Zhou. Gao Zhou. Coming. Gao Zhou ran over and saw Su Tong pointing at the Buddha statue in front of him. Bow down. Ah. Gao Zhou was stunned for a moment, scratched his head, and asked with a puzzled look on his face, what do you do with this thing? I'll worship you when I ask you to. Su Tong kicked Gao Zhou on the butt, and Gao Zhou could only kneel down obediently in front of the Buddha statue. When Gao Zhou was about to bow down, Su Tong held his shoulders and said, hey, don't you have the power of Buddha? Use that to bow. Oh. Gao Zhou nodded. After transforming into corpses, he didn't need to summon zombies. He could easily use the power of those corpses. He clasped his hands together, and a surging Buddha's light actually emerged from his body. As the Buddha's light swayed from Gao Zhou's body, the Buddha statue in front of him actually resonated. The Buddha statue that was obviously covering its mouth actually recited sutras at this moment. Su Tong and Gao Zhou were shocked when they saw this, and saw Gao Zhou hurriedly increasing his Buddhist power. When there was a sudden roar of a big bell, and the monk covering his mouth in front of them turned into a 6-foot golden body in the Buddha's light. The dilapidated palace was transformed into a majestic and sacred temple in an instant. Like an immortal monument, it stood quietly, giving people a sense of majestic and inviolable solemnity. Between reality and fiction. Su Tong was shocked and said in surprise, this is impossible. It's just a shabby copper monk that has been abandoned for so many years. How can it still inspire the connection between reality and reality? But Su Tong soon calmed down. He remembered that in the previous script world, the place where the eldest princess slept was similar to reality. There are places like ghost markets that are different. It can only be said that there are still too many things in this world that cannot be explained clearly for a while. The monk covers his mouth, which means he is enlightened. There was a bright golden light in front of me, and the surrounding valley seemed to be dyed with a layer of golden light, like a giant Buddha sitting cross-legged. Everyone, in front of you is Fenjing Temple on Laojinding. It is said that some strange things happen here every few years, such as on the top of Laojinding, Connie is enthusiastically explaining to the tourists. Suddenly the surrounding light suddenly became brighter. At this time, someone screamed. Everyone gathered around and took a look. They saw that in the sea of clouds under the golden dome, there were flickering colorful halos, vaguely like a Buddhist plate. Sitting among the sea of clouds. Suddenly the entire golden dome was in chaos, and everyone was holding up their cameras to take pictures. Su Tong didn't know what kind of chaos the Jinding was in. But in front of him, Gao Zhou was motionless at this moment, as if he was in trance. Bursts of Buddha's voice reached my ears, as if there were really countless eminent monks meditating and chanting sutras beside me at one time. It is said that Fenjing Mountain has been a holy place of Buddhism since ancient times. Many secluded eminent monks have stayed here to preach the Dharma. However, I did not expect that no one would come after waiting for so many years. As a result, the secret of the Buddha statue has never been revealed. Discover. If Su Tong hadn't discovered this unusual secret path using his life ikumen, I'm afraid it would be difficult for anyone to find this place in the world. It can only be said that Gao Zhou is lucky enough to encounter such a good thing when traveling. Thinking of Su Tong's gaze looking at the destiny above Gao Zhou's head, it turned out to be a cloud of colorful clouds and overwhelming blessings. In the Buddha's light, Gao Zhou's whole body seemed to be sublimated, and his body was dyed with a layer of golden powder by the Buddha's light. Just as he listened, Su Tong felt something was wrong. He just heard the inexplicable Zen chanting and the vast divine voice coming from the Buddhist scriptures: put down the butcher knife and become a Buddha immediately, take refuge in Buddhism, and transcend the other shore. When the voice came, Su Tong couldn't help but move forward, wanting to prostrate himself and kneel in front of the big Buddha. But at this moment, his mind suddenly became hot, and he suddenly woke up. Under the strong stimulation, the golden light and the hall in front of him instantly began to fall apart. At the same time, Su Tong noticed that the prop book was constantly sending messages to him. When he called it out, his expression immediately turned gloomy. Warning: you are attacked by some mysterious force. It is judged to be a level 5 mind control technique. The passive curse of Lilith is activated, resisting. The passive curse of Lilith is activated, resisting successfully. Su Tong squinted at the bronze statue of the monk covering his mouth, feeling shocked and angry. Lilith's curse was immune to level 4 mental control. In addition, Archangel Michael's blessing is immune to damage caused by spiritual attacks, and has a 200% soul increase. It stands to reason that basically most of the mental attacks are ineffective against him. But the spiritual attack of the Buddha statue in front of him actually reached level 5. This is the real world. How could such a terrifying thing appear? In addition to being surprised, he inevitably felt annoyed, and narrowed his eyes. I don't want the beauties in heaven, and you still want me to go to the west and become a monk. Obviously, this bronze statue did not simply want to teach the Dharma, but also seemed to want to forcibly save himself. Thinking of this, Su Tong stretched out his hand to grab the bronze statue. But at this time, he suddenly felt a rapid sound of breaking wind behind his head. Su Tong was startled and hurriedly bent to avoid it. At the same time, he moved Ping Shaluyan, raised his leg and kicked behind him. Boom! I saw Gao Zhou taking a few steps back, then standing up straight again, but his face was covered with a layer of gold powder. He glared at Su Tong like a glaring King Kong, clasped his hands together, and mechanically recited, Amitabha, slay demons and exorcise evil spirits, Namo Amitabha. You are listening to Novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. Infinite Script Killing. Author, Guo Shui Gan Xiao. Chapter 460. Gao Zhou's face was dull, and golden scriptures the size of rice grains shone in the pupils of his eyes. Even his physical body turned into a rock-hard Vajra body under the light of the Buddha. A Buddha's name was heard, and in a blink of an eye, a palm strike struck him. Su Tong did not dodge and used the 5 birds grappling hand. He threw his long arm in front of him, and with one move, Chang Yu Guanyu hit Gao Zhou's palm with one hand. When the two palms touched, there was a collision like thunder. But before Gao Zhou could exert his strength, Su Tong suddenly squatted down in front of him, followed Su Tong's left foot forward on one knee, then turned his right foot sideways, followed by passing Gao Zhou with his body, and slid out from Gao Zhou's lower ribs. This move was a clever move that the spirit ape played with the stupid bear. If Gao Zhou was awake at this moment, he might be able to distance himself immediately, but at this moment, Gao Zhou was even worse than the stupid bear, and he actually chose to quickly turn around and catch Su Tong. This turn requires at least 2 movements. For Su Tong, this is a big door open. He immediately spreads his arms together, steps on his feet in the shape of a crane, and grabs his shoulders in tiger posture. Then he only twists his waist to use his strength. Unexpectedly threw Gao Zhou directly into the air and crashed into the bushes nearby. In terms of strength alone, after Gao Zhou's corpse transformation, he was strong enough to punch through a 3-finger-thick solid wood door, but in terms of combat skills, he was still far behind. Although the proficiency of the 5-animal grasping master is not at the full level, it is still considered to be a master of martial arts. With close combat skills, as long as you don't encounter extreme martial arts idiots like Wang Zheng, there is absolutely no problem against ordinary players. Oh, mentioning Wang Zheng, Su Tong couldn't help but feel a little depressed. This guy actually rejected his invitation, saying that he was going to practice alone for a while. Alas, I even prepared the prop cards, but it's a pity that he didn't come. However, he is not in a hurry to wait for the Yin-Yang Cave incident to be over. After being promoted to a certified player, he will formally establish a team. Wang Zheng will not be able to run away by then. Su Tong's eyes flashed with brilliance, and he couldn't help but think of his cute little friend. Gao Zhou got up from the ground unsteadily, and by chance he was thrown into the mouth of the spring by Su Tong. He was soaked in the water, but as soon as the cold spring water was poured in, he woke up, covered his head and asked, "Why am I lying down?" "Hey, you asked it?" Su Tong pointed at the bronze statue of the monk covering his mouth, walked forward and squatted in front of the statue, stretched out his hand and pulled the statue up. Regardless of whether he pulled it or not, the bronze statue actually split open when he pulled it, and golden sand actually flowed out of the broken bronze statue. The golden sand stained Su Tong's hands, causing Su Tong's expression to change. His palms seemed to be thrown into flames, and were burned with pitted scars in the blink of an eye. Su Tong carefully took out one and threw it into the prop book. Nirvana Phosha. According to rumors, after the great virtuous monk passed away and entered nirvana, his golden body remained immortal after being cremated, and his skull turned into gold, which contained Buddhist teachings. It is an unparalleled treasure. Some tantric sects use the sand to decorate their tattoos, which can lead to the incarnation of the Buddha. Seeing this introductory entry, Su Tong understood in his heart and collected the sand and gave it to Gao Zhou. Since he has a dark constitution, it is of course impossible for him to show off this thing on his back. However, Gao Zhou himself has Buddha power, so this thing is just right for him. This trip was not a loss, I picked it up for nothing. But after this fuss, the two of them had no intention of continuing to climb the mountain. After taking a short rest, we headed back down the mountain. At the foot of Fanjing Mountain are villages with Miao and Tujia people. In the past, this area was a restricted area for Han people, but now there is no distinction between Miao and Han people. Everyone has the same name, Huaxia people. The villages naturally opened hotels and farmhouses. Seeing Su Tong and Gao Zhou coming down the mountain, the villagers warmly asked if they wanted to come in for a meal. It's okay not to mention this, but my stomach can't stand it when I mention Su Tong and Gao Zhou. I chose a pretty good farmhouse and went in. This independent small courtyard has 3 or 4 tables in the courtyard and a small building on stilts behind it. It seems to have been newly renovated. When the old man who was guarding the yard saw the guests coming, he got up and invited them to find a seat to sit down. "Look, it's all farm food. I'll cook whatever you like." The old man looks to be about 70 years old. His white hair makes him look a bit bald, but his black and white eyes are exceptionally bright. As soon as he opens his mouth, he feels full of vitality and ageless. Su Tong handed the menu to Gao Zhou. After all, he was a native of Xiangxi and he was better at ordering than himself. He looked up and down at the old man. The old man has good luck, and there are faint signs of pine trees on the top of his head. This is a sign of good luck, the so-called grass on the wall and pines on the tiles. Both of them are people who need a certain amount of luck to achieve success. The only difference is that the grass on the wall can adapt to the wind, while the pine on the tile is persistent. Judging from the luck on the top of the old man's head, the day when things will come true is already very close. So he smiled and asked, "Old man, are there any happy events recently?" Huh. The old man raised his eyebrows slightly when he heard this, and looked at Su Tong in surprise. "How do you know that, young man? Looking at the spring breeze blowing on your face, joy on your brows, and being in such good spirits, it must be that something good is going to happen recently, so I'll take a guess," Su Tong said with a smile. Hearing this, the old man perked up, sat down and said, "You are so right, my granddaughter is getting married soon." When Su Tong heard this, he suddenly realized, and he quickly congratulated the old man. "Old man, is your family planning a happy event?" Gao Zhou raised his head and immediately glanced at Su Tong. "Since it's a happy event, I'm afraid it wouldn't be appropriate for us to stay in a hotel." "That's not necessary. My granddaughter is getting married in the city. My legs and feet are not good, so I won't go." The old man waved his hand and explained. "Then we'll stay here, in a standard room. In addition, sir, we want these side dishes, a dish of pickled fish, and a bucket of rice." Gao Zhou quickly ordered a few special side dishes. After the old man wrote it down, he stood up and walked to the kitchen. After the old man left, Su Tong frowned. Obviously the happy event the old man said was true, but it was probably not this that really made him so happy. But since the old man didn't say anything, they didn't intend to ask. After all, other people's affairs have nothing to do with me. I just want to eat and drink enough and rest for a night before setting off to Yin Yang Cave early tomorrow morning. Zitsize. After a while, the sound of cooking came from the kitchen. The old man's kitchen used to be open air, but now it has 4 sides of glass. Through the glass, you can clearly see the cooking process of the old man. Although the old man is old, his cooking skills are neat and tidy. Take a live fish, slap it with the back of the knife, remove the gills with 2 knives, insert the chopsticks into the fish's mouth, twist it, and easily take out the fish's internal organs completely. It may seem like a simple skill, but without years of experience in cooking, most people wouldn't be able to do it as smoothly as the old man. A bright kitchen knife for scraping scales and removing bones seemed to be as precise as a delicate scalpel in the old man's hands. Seeing the old man cooking, Su Tong actually felt a sense of enjoyment. If you want to ask him what art is, maybe the scene in front of him is art, and simplicity may be essentially a return to nature. Soon the food was served. Fried pork, pork knuckles, beef with skin, glutinous rice ribs, group photo, tofu, and finally the old man's specialty, fish stuffed with sour sauce. The food on the table is full of color, flavor, which makes people's appetites move. Su Tong first took a bite of the stir-fried pork and put the meat slices in his mouth. The fat and thin slices of meat exuded an attractive spicy aroma. The aroma of the meat stimulated by the stir-frying was put into his mouth with a mixture of spicy and numbing. The aroma of the gravy is also stimulated, making it a perfect dish to go with rice. Gao Zhou first tasted the sour stuffed fish on the side. As a Xiangzi native, he knew very well how sourness has ruled this land for thousands of years. The mellow sour aroma produced by the slow fermentation of whole grains through natural processes converges into sour juice, which is sour but not overpowering. The addition of chopped peppers and tomatoes makes the taste more distinct. Put the fish in the pot and cook slowly until the sour soup melts into every inch of the tender texture of the fish. This dish is considered a success. As soon as you take one bite, you will feel a strong spiciness at first, and then a unique sour taste, which is simply irresistible. Delicious. When Gao Zhou took a bite, he was so sour that the hairs all over his body stood on end. This was definitely the most delicious sour fish he had ever eaten. A table of food is enough to feed 8 people at least, but it is not enough for two foodies like Su Tong and Gao Zhou. In just one pot of tea, the food on the table was completely eaten, not even the rice in the rice bucket was left. This still surprised the old man. It seemed that he hadn't seen such a good eating young man for a long time. After watching the two of them finish eating, the old man was still worried that they were full, so he quickly made a pot of tea. Su Tong drank tea and took out a hookah pipe. When the old man saw the thing in Su Tong's hand, he couldn't help but be startled. This is a good thing. Su Tong smiled, and Gao Zhou also took out his own. Although not as big as Su Tong, he is not small either. The old man looked behind the two of them with doubts on his face. He didn't know where he got this thing from. He silently got up and walked into the house to take out his hookah pipe. Good guy, that hookah pipe is bigger than Su Tong's, more than 1 meter long, and the coating on it seems to be old. This is not surprising, after all, in western Hunan, the Miao people like to smoke hookah pipes the most. Su Tong also specially took out his own tobacco to share with the old man. This was high-quality goods carefully prepared by Gao Tianfang, and it really made the old man's face light up. This is good stuff. It was available before, but not now. The old man took a sip and tasted it slowly, then sighed and asked Su Tong and Gao Zhou to save their meal money. Gao Zhou quickly said no, but the old man insisted. In his words, this kind of tobacco is worth a piece of tobacco. You can't even buy it with money, and a meal is worth nothing. Seeing this, Su Tong didn't let Gao Zhou refuse any more, and then directly handed half a pack of tobacco to the old man. It's too expensive to use. The expression on the old man's face changed slightly and he quickly refused. You said one mouthful is worth a gold, and your meal today is worth the same price in our mouths. Su Tong said with a smile. No matter how good the cut tobacco is, it is not said to be more precious than gold, but for the elderly, money is not important, but the cut tobacco is. In the same way, cut tobacco is not important to Su Tong, but such a delicious meal is worth half a pack of cut tobacco to him. The old man burst out laughing when he heard this, and he felt like he had met an old friend. He no longer refused, and even patted his chest and said, "If you like it, I will prepare a special meal for you tonight. I guarantee that you will never forget it. I haven't eaten it. Then we'll have a good time." The three of them suddenly burst into laughter. For a while, the three of them, one old, two young, were sitting at the door. They were smoking so hard that it was a happy time. A group of people walked in from the door, holding microphones in front and cameras behind them. They were reporters. As soon as they entered the house, they started taking pictures on their own, as if they were promoting the village. The old man was already used to this and allowed them to take pictures. At this time, the reporter turned the camera and saw the three people sitting together smoking hookah, and his eyes lit up. He walked up to the three of them, pointed the microphone at the old man and asked, "Hello, are you a Miao?" The old man nodded. It is said that we Miao people have many mysterious stories, such as the art of bewitching. Do you know this? The old man frowned when he heard this and nodded, "A little bit, a little bit." Hearing the old man's words, the reporter's eyes lit up. "Then can you let us take a look?" However, the old man shook his head firmly and said seriously, "The village director won't let it be used. If you use it, you will be scolded." Su Tong, who was sitting aside, almost laughed when he heard this answer. But when he glanced at the top of the old man's head from the corner of his eye, his heart skipped a beat and sank. He saw that the luck on top of the old man's head suddenly collapsed, and even traces of blood appeared, which was clearly a bloody disaster. What surprised Su Tong even more was that when he calculated it with his fingers, he saw that a bad visitor came to his door, but he didn't expect that the problem still happened to him. At the same time, on the beach in Sanya, a thin young man was standing there with a backpack on his back, looking at the sexy beauties passing by on the beach through the sunglasses on his nose. Compared to the revealing swimsuits, the young people focused more on the women's buttocks. While his eyes were looking at these beauties, the young man put his other hand on the backpack on his waist and fumbled around. At this time, his eyes suddenly lit up, and his gaze was like a cheetah's target, fixed firmly on a young woman in her 30s in front of her. No, strictly speaking, he was staring at the young woman's buttocks, and the hands in his backpack began to move restlessly. Watching the young woman slowly walking towards the milk tea shop nearby, the young man raised his eyebrows slightly and followed her silently. There happened to be very few people around the milk tea shop, so the young man could wait in line closely behind the young woman. Looking at the young woman's raised buttocks, the young man couldn't help but swallow, and silently took his hands out of his backpack slowly. Little Orange. At this moment, a man suddenly shouted and ran over from not far away. When the young woman heard this, she immediately turned around, waved her hand and ran towards the man. This made the young man's face change slightly, and he could only watch the young woman's leaving figure reluctantly. "Hey, man, you have a good eye." The boss lying on the bar seemed to have noticed the young man a long time ago. He walked down and handed the young woman a cigarette with a smile. He stared at the young woman's back and said, "Excellent, look at those breasts, long legs, tisk tisk." The young man was startled and looked sideways at the boss with a strange expression. He did not accept the cigarette he handed him, but instead cursed with a look of disgust. "Pervert, bah." After saying that, he turned around and left. The boss was stunned for a few seconds and greeted the young man's family with curse words. Naturally, the young man could hear the boss's scolding, but he ignored it. It was just that he lost the goal he had finally found, which made him feel lonely and unhappy. As he silently took his hand out of his satchel, a bloody screwdriver appeared in his hand. Looking at the straight and hard screwdriver, I couldn't help but play with it with my hands. Unfortunately, just a little bit. The young man was playing with the screwdriver. Although it was not time for dinner, he still couldn't help but feel hungry. When he looked up, he saw a small restaurant. So I opened the door and walked in. When I looked up, I saw a live TV show introducing the scenery of Western Hunan on the TV hanging in the restaurant. I didn't pay much attention at first and ordered a seafood fried rice. But as soon as he sat down and looked up, the young man suddenly felt as if he was struck by lightning. In the picture, a face that he would never forget appeared in front of him in a puff of smoke with a cigarette in his mouth. The eyes under the dark sunglasses gradually turned red. The boss, who was concentrating on frying rice in the kitchen, suddenly heard a roar, followed by a banging sound, and hurriedly ran out to take a look. The table was overturned, and the restaurant was in a mess. The boss was dumbfounded, and suddenly noticed a screwdriver stuck in the table. Just when the boss was about to reach out and take off the screwdriver, the air in front of his eyes suddenly distorted, and a dark crack appeared in front of the boss. Then a palm pulled out the screwdriver, and then suddenly waved the screwdriver in front of the boss. A flash of cold light flashed. Infinite script killing. Author, Guo Shui Gan Xiao. Chapter 462. Puff. Bright red blood gushed out from the incised wound. Soon, the pig lying on the display board closed its eyes peacefully. A basin full of pig blood was picked up and placed on the table. Gao Zhou took a look at it and couldn't help but smash it in his mouth. It seems that since he transformed into a corpse, he has always had the urge to drink raw blood, but he still suppressed this urge. Swish. Wiping off the blood on the blade, the bright broadsword began to dissect. First, cut through the abdomen and completely remove the internal organs. Then start deboning and decomposing the pork. Place the pork neatly on the table and cut it into whole pieces according to the classification of the pork. The smooth process made the old man smoking a hookah on the side nod and praise him repeatedly. Su Tong originally said that he was here to kill the pig, but the old man was worried that he would not be able to kill the pig, so he would not hurt himself. But judging from the killing process just now, the old man had to admit that he had underestimated this young man. "Hey, I told you, my family has been butchering pigs for 3 generations, so I know how to watch it." Su Tong raised his head and grinned at the old man. Gao Zhou glanced at his mouth casually, looking like he wanted to laugh but didn't dare. In fact, according to the original plan, the two of them should have entered the mountain early this morning, but Su Tong changed his mind last night. Through calculation, the old man's drastic change in luck seems to have a lot to do with him. It would be fine if he was just unlucky, but it was a bloody disaster, which inevitably surprised Su Tong. He didn't know why this happened, so he decided to wait and see what would happen, and he actually killed the old man because of himself. The old man was particularly happy when he learned that they were going to live here for a longer time, not only because Su Tong and the others generously booked the largest and best room, which brought a lot of income to the old man, but also for a long time. I have never met such a young person. As people get older, no matter what glorious years they have had, when they get older, they prefer to have a few young people around them who can talk. It seems that they can find some peace and harmony in these young children. A place that connects with one's own past. But now in the village, after leaving aside the tourists who come and go in a hurry, it is rare to see a few young people. If it weren't for the fact that this place is close to the scenic spot and crowded with people, if it were a village farther away, you would only see an old man sitting in front of a bonfire in a dark shabby house, expressionless, in a daze. So today the old man specially prepared a pig. On the one hand, he wanted to stock up on ingredients for his daughter who was about to return home for the Chinese New Year. On the other hand, he also planned to prepare a specialty dish for the two young men, Su Tong and Gao Zhou. Pig legs are thickly coated with salt and hung above the kitchen to make ham. Don't look at the 3 or 4 black doors and zombie legs hanging on it. They are all the old man's treasures. Today, the old man specially prepared a piece of bacon and fresh pork belly to prepare a specialty dish for them. Su Tong and Gao Zhou were also happy to relax and enjoy life. Take the vegetable basket and go to the vegetable garden behind the building to pick some vegetables. Halfway through, a phone call came. Su Tong saw that it was Yang Zixuan's call. Seeing the phone, Su Tong raised his eyebrows slightly, pressed the answer button and said, "Isn't it the time yet?" Previously, Yang Zixuan used the altar to synthesize the secret of the title, and made an exchange with Su Tong. If he didn't call Su Tong after 15 days, Su Tong would go straight to Yang Zixuan's hometown and take over his relatives for protection. Seeing that there was still a week left, Yang Zixuan called. On the other end of the phone, Yang Zixuan smiled, "Let me remind you, I'm afraid you will forget it by then." After all, a time in the script world will always make people forget about these small things. That's you. I always set the alarm in advance. Would you like to have a drink at the exhibition tomorrow? Yang Zixuan on the other end of the phone seemed to be in a particularly good mood. After the gloomy and depressed feeling last time, it seemed that there had been some new changes during this period that made him more confident about the future. But think about it, he has sold the secret of synthesizing titles to so many people, and has already accumulated a large number of script points, and then uses these script points to quickly enhance his strength in a short period of time. Naturally, he has plans for the future. Somewhat certain. I won't go. I have something to do here. I wish you good luck. I hope that when we meet next time, we can have a good chat about the secrets between certified players. Su Tong directly rejected Yang Zixuan. Ha ha ha, when the time comes, I think you can consider joining my new team. The position of deputy leader will always be reserved for you. I won't believe a word you say, you old scumbag. Su Tong curled his lips and hung up the phone. Yang Zixuan, who was on the other end of the phone, put down the phone in his hand. He was shuddering in his heart, and suddenly the smile on his face froze. Wait a minute, this guy just said that the secrets between authenticated players, his could it be? A ridiculous idea appeared in Yang Zixuan's mind. For a moment, he shook his head and said, "Impossible, impossible, I must be overthinking. How could he reach the level of certified players so quickly? I must be overthinking. Tou, look here." As soon as he hung up the phone, Gao Zhou shouted from the side. Su Tong walked over and took a look and found that there was a low house behind the vegetable garden. The house had no windows, but the environment inside could be seen clearly through the crack in the door. Gao Zhou was lying on the crack of the door and watching. "What are you looking at?" Su Tong kicked Gao Zhou in the butt. Why did this guy like to peek through the cracks in the door so much? After saying that, he stepped forward and squinted at the crack in the door, only to see various bottles and jars placed behind the crack. It looked like a jar for pickling pickles, but compared to these jars, Su Tong was more surprised that there was a big red coffin placed behind the door. "Does the handsome guy stay in the hotel?" An enthusiastic lady at the entrance of the village came forward and asked the young man in front of her. While asking, she did not forget to look at the young man up and down, and she couldn't help but frown secretly. Are today's young people so not afraid of the cold? It's winter, and they are still wearing such thin clothes. The young man shook his head, but took out a 100 yuan note from his bag and handed it to the aunt. "Aunt, I have a friend who came to play first, but my phone was broken and I couldn't contact him. I just heard him say that living in the place has been interviewed and promoted. Do you know which one it is?" "How could I know that?" The aunt scratched her head and did not accept the young man's money. She just thought for a moment and said, "How about you go forward and take a look?" Yesterday, there seemed to be reporters doing publicity, but they were from the front houses. The houses over there are beautifully decorated. They must be the ones who want to promote it. "Okay, thank you, ma'am." After the young man said this, he put the money into the aunt's hand without any explanation, and then left without looking back. The young man had already left before the aunt had time to stop him. She could only look at the 100 yuan in her hand with a dumbfounded look, and sighed, "Hey, this kid is a very nice person, but why does he look so dull?" Following the direction pointed by the aunt, the young man looked at one house after another. Just as the aunt complained, the young man dressed in summer clothes looked like a lunatic in the eyes of everyone. Facing the surprised looks from the people around him, the young man didn't take it seriously at all, but his red eyes under his sunglasses carefully examined the faces of everyone passing by. Suddenly, his steps slowed down and his eyes stared at the three-story farmhouse in front of him, and a familiar picture suddenly appeared in his mind. He pricked up his ears and listened carefully. When a familiar voice came from the house, the young man was suddenly shaken. He would never forget this voice. For a moment, the hand couldn't help but reach into the bag on his waist. "Red coffin. I don't know why the coffin is red, but this kind of red coffin is popular among people here." The old man in the kitchen was cutting vegetables. When he heard Su Tong's question, he couldn't help but explain with a smile. The reason why Su Tong and Gao Zhou were so interested in the red coffin was because after Su Tong saw the coffin, he discovered that the coffin had a vaguely special power. It's not that the coffin is magical, it's empty inside, but it's precisely because of the unique red coffin itself that it seems to have a special color imprint, which makes a kind of power that seems to be there or not shrouded in it. But then the old man's voice changed. "If you really want to know, you might as well go to the ringing team in the village outside and ask. It's called the Sunjia ringing team. It is an old ringing team in our village that has a history of more than 100 years. They must know why." The so-called ringer team refers to a band that specializes in red and white things. Nowadays, with the changing times, it is difficult to see this kind of ringer team. Firstly, it costs a lot, secondly, the city does not allow illegal operations, and thirdly, it disturbs the people. The most important thing is inconvenience. The wedding company directly connects a large speaker to a Bluetooth mobile phone, and everything you want can be played for you. It is simple and trouble-free. So now in big cities, this kind of gong playing and drum beating troupe is basically no longer seen. However, in places like the countryside, there are still such teams, but as the old man said, a ringer team with a century-old heritage is really rare. And speaking of it, the ringer team is also a part of the yin scene. If it really is the kind that has inheritance, I really need to investigate it. While he was talking, the old man had already put the lid on the pot and smiled at the two of them. It's still early now, you go ahead. The leader of the Sun family's ringer team is called Sun Sheahuo, nicknamed Lehutu. We have a good relationship. You guys, after you go there, say that it was Sanli Yuze who asked you to come, and he promises not to make things difficult for you. Hearing what the old man said, Su Tong was moved. He just glanced at the luck on top of the old man's head and couldn't help but hesitate. Go quickly. I saw Sun Sheahuo when I went to buy pigs in the morning. This man is not often in the village. This is the only one in the village. If you go late, someone might just take the job and go out. Okay. Seeing what the old man said, Su Tong stopped worrying and just patted Gao Zhou on the shoulder. Just stay, you are not interested in this kind of folklore exchange. Gao Zhou knew what Su Tong meant, so he sat beside the stove and started eating melon seeds. Seeing Su Tong's leaving figure, the young man in the corner carefully poked his head out, his eyes darkly red under his sunglasses. I wanted to follow him, but then I thought about it and looked sideways at the farmhouse on the side. With a sinister smile on my face, I walked towards the farmhouse. Infinite Script Killing. Author, Guo Shui Gan Xiao. Chapter 463. Hey, old man, just wait a little longer. Anyway, you're not missing a day or two. As soon as Su Tong left, Gao Zhou muttered to himself while cracking melon seeds. How do you know I'm not missing 2 days? The old man on the side was stunned for a moment and looked at Gao Zhou with a strange expression. Hearing this, Gao Zhou quickly waved his hand and explained, No, I'm talking about something else. By the way, old man, can I ask something from you? The old man nodded. He has grown up here for half his life and nothing else. But if you ask about anything, whether it is the love story between Grandma Li and Uncle Wang or the birthmark on the buttocks of the old Zhang family's daughter-in-law, the old man knows it very well. Do you know the place called Black Wind Pond? Black Wind Pond. The old man was stunned for a second, as if he was thinking about the name. No. I think I've heard of it, but I don't think it's in this area. Are you looking for the wrong place? Gao Zhou was shocked. He was just asking casually, but he didn't expect the old man to actually know. He immediately became more energetic. You know, that's great. If Black Wind Pond is not here, then where is it? If you ask others about this place, you may not necessarily know about it. Only older people know about this place. When there was banditry in western Hunan, the bandit leader occupied a hilltop. It was easy to defend but difficult to attack. That hilltop was called Hefengling. It is said that there is a black wind somewhere every summer. As long as the black wind blows on a person, his skin will peel off even if he is not dead. If the black wind is stronger, all humans and animals will die wherever it passes. Some people say that it is the territory of the Black Wind King. Later, when we were suppressing bandits, we also encountered this black storm. I heard that it was quite disastrous at the time. It is said that a passing Taoist priest cast a spell and dispersed the black wind. The Taoist priest left a message before leaving. Immortals are no more than Black Wind Ridge, and the yin and yang are beyond the gate and within the gate. There are hundreds of poisons in the world, but they are not as dangerous as the human heart. He proclaimed himself a prince to represent Yama, but little did he know that he would never meet the real king of hell. Don't be fooled that there are no ghosts and gods today, for there will be retribution in the future. Strangely enough, since the Taoist priest read this passage, Hefeng can no longer be seen in Hefeng Ridge, so the black water pool Gao Zhou mentioned is right under Hefeng Ridge. Great, then can you tell me where the Black Wind Ridge is? Gao Zhou hit the snake with a stick, quickly poured a cup of tea for the old man, and asked where the Black Wind Ridge was. Hearing this, the old man waved his hand. You can go wherever you want, to Black Wind Ridge, don't go, don't go. But we really have to go to Black Wind Ridge. Master, you must help us. Gao Zhou was really a little anxious. Although the Lingling Yin and Yang Feng Shui map in his hand had corresponding drawings, times have changed drastically. Even a modern high-definition map needs to be updated every year, let alone a completely hand-drawn map. Maps cannot stand up to scrutiny in many places. The two of them could only find a vague direction based on the map. After entering the mountains, it might not be easy to find this location. No, no, kid, you can't go there. The old Chinese said earnestly, when we suppressed bandits, there were too many bandits who died in Hefeng Ridge. They were so evil that none of them could come back. Just when Gao Zhou wanted to continue persuading him, he heard a cry from outside the door, "Boss, is there anything to eat?" While talking, a young man wearing sunglasses opened the door and walked in. Gao Zhou glanced sideways and felt a thump in his heart. He didn't recognize the young man, but on such a cold day, the young man was wearing summer clothes and didn't care about the cold outside. However, his physique didn't seem to be particularly strong. So when he saw the young man for the first time, two words flashed through Gao Zhou's mind: player. There are some. The young man is not afraid of the cold. He is wearing so little. The old man stepped forward, looked at the young man, and exclaimed, "My body is naturally hot and I'm not afraid of the cold. Boss, please bring me something to eat. I'm very hungry," the young man said with a smile. As he spoke, he glanced sideways at Gao Zhou who was sitting beside him. After the two looked at each other, they were startled at the same time. The young man grinned and nodded towards Gao Zhou with a smile. Although the probability of players meeting each other in reality is not low, Gao Zhou is inevitably wary of meeting them in such a remote place. Coupled with what Su Tong said last night, he suddenly becomes even more wary. "Stand up." Seeing the young man nodding and smiling towards him, Gao Zhou reluctantly nodded. The old man didn't notice these details and said with a smile, Okay, you came at the right time. I just happened to make a special dish. I will divide it for you to eat early." As the old man said this, he walked into the kitchen and prepared to serve lunch to the two of them. As for Su Tong's portion, he said that he could leave a separate portion for him. When the old man walked into the kitchen, the young man sat directly opposite Gao Zhou. "Hello, my Enran Yu, what do you call me?" "Hide the corpse." Gao Zhou said a random title with a cold face. No one among the players will tell each other their real names. If someone takes advantage of them, they will be in big trouble. However, as soon as Gao Zhou finished speaking, the old man poked his head out of the kitchen and said, "Xiao Gao, do you want rice or noodles?" Gao Zhou's mouth twitched, but he still pretended to be relaxed and responded, "Eat noodles. Eat some noodles. I'll roll some noodles for you later, young man." Zhang Renai raised his head and said with a smile, "I like to eat rice." "Okay, I'll be ready in a minute." The old man nodded, then got into the kitchen and started working again. "Actually, I think you should eat rice." Zhang Grenyu looked at Gao Zhou with a smile. Hearing this, Gao Zhou also sneered. He glanced at the door thoughtfully, raised his brows and sneered, "Yes, longevity noodles and decapitated rice. I think it's better for me to eat noodles." "You think I can't kill you?" Zhang Renai looked towards the kitchen, "But I think I can." Sensing Zhang Renai's gaze, his face immediately turned cold, and a cold murderous aura surged out of his body. You could see that Gao Zhou's nails were rapidly growing longer and turning black. Zhang Renai seemed to have noticed this, but instead he became more excited and put his palms in the bag on his waist to fumble around, while not forgetting to glance at Gao Zhou's buttocks. At this moment, the old man placed a bowl of hot rice and a stack of cooked noodles on the table. "Serve the main food first, and the dishes will be served later. Don't be in a hurry." Jean Renaud always kept a smile on his face. "Uncle, the wind is stronger here, can you close the door first?" "Okay, you can turn it off." The old man didn't take it seriously, and handed a bottle of wine from the cabinet to the table. "Drink some of the rice wine I brewed to drive away the cold." "Did I just tell you to wear this, too little?" "Okay." Burian Renaud always behaves like a good baby, harmless to humans and animals. He stood up and walked slowly to the door, closing the courtyard door. Gao Zhou originally wanted to take advantage of the closing moment to take action, but Jean Renaud seemed to be on guard. Before Gao Zhou could take action, he pointed in the direction of the kitchen. "The underlying meaning is that if you dare to take action, I will kill the old man first." Gao Zhou looked sideways at the kitchen after hearing this. Through the kitchen glass, I saw the old man rummaging for something on the cupboard. He frowned and could only sit down temporarily. He regards human life as grass, and the life and death of the old man is actually not important to him. But this is the real world after all. If someone loses his life, it can't always be like in the world of the script. The worst he can do is just leave, and the subsequent impact will affect his family. Furthermore, I hadn't learned the location of the Black Wind Pond from the old man, so I couldn't help but hold back the anger in my heart and sit down again. Seeing this, Zanren nodded with satisfaction and sat back on the chair. Then he changed the positions of the rice and noodles on the table, and the smile on his lips slightly raised. "I've changed my mind. It's up to you to eat the decapitated rice." Gilialo. When the iron pot was opened, steaming white mist rose, and a rich aroma began to spread. I saw that the meat in the pot was red and translucent, exuding an attractive luster and fragrance. However, the old man didn't seem very satisfied with this. Slowly he pulled out a small square wooden box from the cupboard. Carefully wipe off the dust on the box with a rag, walked to the stove and opened the box, only to see a big shriveled toad in the box. The toad had been stir-fried so much that only a piece of skin was left, but even so, the size of the toad could be estimated through the skin. At least even the fatter bullfrog is probably not 1/3 the size of the toad in the box. What's strange is that the toad's back is actually densely covered with pearls the size of rice grains. The old man shook his finger, and suddenly beads-like things spilled from the toad's back and fell into the pot. Looking at this delicious meal, the old man finally showed a kind smile on his face. "Once in a while, the village director won't know." You are listening to Novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. Infinite Script Killing. Author, Guo Shui Gan Xiao. Chapter 464. At one end of the village, there are 3 small private buildings. The building is beautifully built, with particularly large floor-to-ceiling windows facing the east, and a glass light well on the roof. From a distance, you can see various green plants planted on it, even chrysanthemums blooming in the season. Outside the courtyard is a row of straight green bamboos and a path paved with warm stones, giving the small building a somewhat poetic and artistic conception. It also makes these 3 small buildings look out of place with the traditional stilted buildings in the surrounding villages. What a feng shui! Su Tong stood on the slope and looked around the building in front of him. Although he was not deeply involved in feng shui, the theory of feng shui could not be escaped from the 4 words. Hide the wind and accept the energy. Because Xiangxi is a mountainous area, the land is moist and complex, so stilted buildings are more popular to cope with the uneven mountain environment. In addition, stilted buildings can also be used to raise livestock downstairs, or store sundries, etc. The location of the 3 buildings in front of me is very good. Not only do they occupy a high position on the terrain, they are also a rare flat land. The terrain faces east, gathering yang qi, and the bamboo forests planted around it seem to have been carefully planted to avoid evil spirits and gather qi. Su Tong used his life ikumen to look at it, and found that this location actually echoed the Fenjing mountain behind it. It indeed looked like it had been arranged by an expert. This also made him more certain that this ringer team did have a legacy. As I walked over, I heard the sound of mahjong playing in the distance. Looking sideways, he saw 4 old people sitting in a bamboo pavilion playing mahjong. Su Tong walked over and took a look. These 4 old people, 3 men and 1 woman, were all in their early 70s. Except for the old man in the south, the aura of the other 3 old people is not weak, and they look like some practicing people. I'm confused, I'm so happy, ha 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 ha. At this time, the old lady sitting on the right pushed the mahjong and couldn't help laughing proudly. Oops, it's you again. The old man sitting in the south slapped his head when he saw this, took out the last $2 in his pocket and threw it on the table. He got up and left. No more fun, go home and eat. Hey, don't go, Lao Yao, we agreed to have lunch here. Seeing that the old man was about to leave, the other 3 old men hurriedly shouted, but the old man seemed determined to leave, and the 3 of them were stunned and did not stop him. Hey, why are you so petty at your age? The old woman curled her lips, then turned her eyes. She noticed the young man standing beside her at some point, and was stunned for a moment. Who are you? The other 2 old men also turned to look at Su Tong, and their expressions suddenly looked a little surprised. They didn't know if they were too focused on playing cards, but suddenly a young man appeared behind them, and they didn't even notice it. I'm passing by. Are you playing mahjong with you? Can you take care of the food? Su Tong asked, looking at the vacant seat. When the 3 old men heard this, they couldn't help but look at each other, wondering where this idiot came from. But there is no reason not to welcome people who come to play cards. An old man smiled and said, okay, the cards we play are not big. It costs 6 yuan a round. Whether you come or not, whether you come or not, whether you win or lose, you will be in charge of the food. Then I want to sit on the west side. Su Tong pointed to the old woman's position. The old woman grinned, stood up and moved away from her. The 3 of them are famous for playing mahjong. Even if they change positions, they can still kill everyone. Su Tong sat down, took out 3 copper coins from his pocket, and placed them on the corner of his table. The 3 of them were a little surprised when they saw this. The old man who had just spoken smiled and said, Master Jin of the West, you put 3 copper plates to change the feng shui. I can't tell. You understand it quite well, but I don't think the way you put it is good correct. It's just a form, sincerity is the spirit. Su Tong said with a smile. He glanced at De Ya behind him from the corner of his eye and saw that De Ya had already started gearing up. It turns out that the reason why Su Tong is so calm and composed is because De Ya just now patted her chest and assured him that when it comes to playing mahjong, even if the sparrow god is alive, he is no match for her. After Su Tong sat down, he tiptoed, and De Ya landed lightly on Su Tong behind him. Don't worry, headmaster, no matter how hard the 3 of them fight, they are no match for me. De Ya is indeed not bragging. She has played everything from Pai Gao to mahjong in the northeast, and she has never met an opponent. While shuffling the cards with his hands, he could see that the universe had already been moved under his fingers, and everything was clearly arranged. Su Tong was also happy to have peace of mind, and took advantage of the opportunity to touch the cards and ask the names of the 3 old men. Just call me Jugu. The bearded one's surname is Luo, and the one on the left is surnamed Yang. Where do you come from, young man? Mei Jugu asked. People from Luoyang, here to travel. Su Tong responded. When she heard the word Luoyang, Mei Jugu was stunned for a moment, but she didn't take it seriously. After a round of cards, Mr. Yang hit a red hit. Su Tong gently pushed the card, it's blurred. Ah! The three old men were stunned for a moment, and then looked at Su Tong's cards, 7 pairs, single fishing. Hey, the young man is interesting, come again. Yang Lao's eyes widened, wondering how this boy could be so lucky. He glanced at the other two, and after the three of them understood each other, they continued to fight. As a result, as Dia said, she has never lost in mahjong. Dairy Hu, pure color, double bright bars, big 4 joys, 9 lotus lanterns, 13 units. Good guy. After 2 hours of fighting, the 3 old men were stunned and completely defeated. Mei Jigu's face turned green, and Luo Ying was so angry that he wanted to flip the table. On the other hand, Mr. Yang was very tolerant and joked, this is the first time the 3 of us have been beaten so badly while playing cards, ha ha ha. Old man, I want to ask you something. Are you from the Sun family's piano class? I want to find Sun Xiaohua. Su Tong said and threw out the 2 cakes in his hand. Mr. Yang was sitting in his next house, waiting for this card. Hearing Su Tong's inquiry, he was a little surprised at first, but when he saw the 2 cakes thrown out, he immediately happy. It's awesome. Then he looked at Su Tong again and said, what do you want from Sun Xiaohua? Oh, I particularly like folk culture, so I want to ask why people here use red coffins. It's a custom. You can find out by searching online. Mei Jigu, who was sitting opposite Su Tong, said casually. Then you can believe what's on it. The first 10 messages you click on are all advertisements. They are obviously for boots, but they insist on saying that they are for hospitals. They are just fabricating things out of nothing. No one will believe it. The red coffin is a custom here. I can't tell you the details clearly. I can only say that it is a ticket. It is said that the souls buried in the red coffin can enter the Yin-Yang mountain and become the subjects of the mountain god. Mr. Yang didn't have so many taboos and explained. Su Tong's face remained calm, but in his heart he couldn't help but think of another place, the Yin-Yang cave. Yin-Yang mountain? Shouldn't we be entering the netherworld Yinko? Su Tong asked, pretending to be confused. Yang Lao wanted to say something, but Luo Ying, who was sitting on the other side of Su Tong, coughed heavily, interrupting Yang Lao's thoughts. Play cards, just play cards. What are you talking about? It's bad luck. After Luo Ying finished speaking, he pushed the cards down with his hand and stood up, I'm hungry. Let's go eat. No more playing. Hey, I won't play anymore. I'm getting old and tired. Mei Jigu also stood up. Su Tong noticed at this time that Luo Ying had 2 copper symbols hanging behind his back, while Mei Jigu had 2 drumsticks on her waist. It seems that the 2 of them are indeed members of the ringer class. Yang Lao stood up and stretched with a smile, let's have a meal together. After saying that, he took Su Tong inside. It can be seen that Mr. Yang is particularly fond of young people. When several young people entered the yard and saw Mr. Yang, they all greeted him warmly. Look, this is our ringer team. In the past, there were more than 60 people in our team. Now with these guys and us old bones, there are only a dozen people. Mr. Yang seemed to be sighing, but when he changed his words, he looked at Su Tong, pinched his beard and said sincerely. My child, times have changed, let's just leave folklore and weird stories on paper. It doesn't matter if it's written randomly or randomly, as long as it's not harmful to anyone, it doesn't matter whether it's the truth or not. There are many ways to promote traditional culture, but there are some things that are no longer a pity. Su Tong didn't expect Mr. Yang to say these words, and was a little surprised. I had to re-examine whether the old man in front of me was really broad-minded. When he spoke again, he couldn't help but change his tone. Someone has said this before about smashing the Buddha of reality and getting rid of the demons in your heart. I was just curious before, but what you just said seems to be related to another thing related to me, so I must ask. I understand. Su Tong did not tell lies this time. I came here simply to learn about the red coffin, but I didn't expect that the red coffin seemed to be related to the Yin Yang cave, so I needed to ask more questions to get a clearer understanding. Let's talk while we eat. Seeing Su Tong's firm attitude, Mr. Yang nodded and agreed. But just as the two of them entered the hall, an old man with a crew cut stood in front of them, and Luo Ying and Mei Jigu stood behind the old man. The old man looked about 80 years old, but his energy was not inferior to that of the young people working. He has thick eyebrows, big eyes, a high nose and wide lips, and his eyes are filled with a sharpness that is repellent. I am Sun Sheahuo, what do you want from me? As the saying goes, a man lives up to his name, and the old man does have a bit of the demeanor of a mountain king. It's just that this kind of aura can calm ordinary people, but it feels nothing to Su Tong. Compared with Ma Chi, who usually smiles but is vigorous and resolute when focused, Sun Sheahuo's aura is like a little cat at best. San Chi introduced me here. I want to ask the old man about the red coffin and the rumors. Sun Sheahuo didn't answer when he heard this. He looked Su Tong up and down, frowned and said, have you passed the threshold shoulder to shoulder on the line? This is a slang in the world. Su Tong naturally has a good family background, which means that he is a friend of a local snake and reports to his family. Su Tong hesitated for a moment, thinking about whether to pretend to be stupid. Just listen to Sun Sheahuo continue, if Yatter is an old man, just leave. Young man, if you are a layman, just leave. Hearing this, Su Tong knew that there was no way around this step, so he could only straighten his clothes, cross his hands in a gesture of respect, and show two thumbs. The 7th store on Dongmen Street, the new springboard ladle, sells at the top chicken. If you wake up, you can only show off. The junior head of Kimen passed by here to have a meal and pay respects. He didn't want to be found out, so he could only explain his words. Sun Sheahuo and others were stunned when they heard this. Mei Jigu and Luo Ying stared at Su Tong with cold eyes and said, you just said that you are from Luoyang, are you from the 7 gates of Luoyang? Infinite script killing. Author, Guo Shui Gan Xiao. Chapter 465. Sun Sheahuo's expression suddenly changed, and everyone in the yard seemed to be frozen in place. Mr. Yang, who had just spoken to Su Tong, tugged at the corner of Su Tong's clothes and looked at him anxiously. Why are you from the 7th sect? You killed me. When Su Tong saw this, he immediately understood what was going on. In the final analysis, the master killed too hard back then and dragged the old guys from the entire era to be buried with him, which led to the severance of many inheritances. Everyone in the 9-level sect was offended. When Master Song was buried, no matter how much money Mr. Song offered, not a single ringer team was willing to come. I thought that after so many years and the place was so remote, the things in the early years would have disappeared with the passage of time. I didn't expect that people still remembered this grudge. It's not my fault. After all, Chiu can't be easily forgotten. I am not qualified to ask others to let go of their past grudges. Therefore, facing Sun Sheahuo's cold face, Su Tong was not afraid at all. Instead, he nodded and admitted, exactly. As he spoke, he took out the demon bell in his hand. With a slight sway, the sound of the conjure soul-stirring bell suddenly changed the expressions of everyone present. Those present were all masters of musical instruments, and they could tell whether the magic bell was real or fake as soon as they heard it. Sun Sheahuo frowned and said, are you from the Wang family? Both families. Shui Gui is my master. In fact, he could have said that he inherited the inheritance of the Wang family, but Su Tong didn't bother to do so. Now that he has worshipped Mr. Song and recognized his master, he is the direct descendant of the 7 sects of the 8 classics. He can even say that he is now a talker of the seven sects with upright Miaohong roots. Sure enough, Sun Sheahu said with a smile when he heard this, okay, back then, there were 3 branches of paper tying skills in my Huazhuang, and you alone own 2. Now you still have the demonic bell, and the 7 sects can be regarded as follow-up people. After saying that, Sun Sheahu slowly walked to the table stand, picked up the suana on the table stand, pointed at Su Tong and said angrily, since you are a talker in Qi sect, tell me about the account of your master Shuigui back then, how to calculate it. Oh, what are you doing? It's been so many years. What does it matter to you and him, a young man? Mr. Yang hurriedly stepped forward to stop between the two, looked back at Su Tong and said, you go away, don't come back again, come on, let's go. But neither Sun Sheahu nor Su Tong paid attention to Yang Lao's words. At the same time, several young people in the family stood up with unkind expressions and silently closed the door. Seeing this, Mr. Yang became even more anxious. He pointed at the boys who were closing the door and cursed, you bastards are rebelling. Who told you to close the door? Open it. It's not a big deal. At this time, Mrs. May stepped forward, grabbed Mr. Yang's arm and pulled him back. Old Yang. There always has to be an explanation for things. The old lady is still buried on Buman Mountain. It has been so many years. Back then, the 3 religions came forward to prevent us from settling accounts with the 7th section. Now the people from the 7th sect have brought this matter to us. Always tell the truth. That's right, Mr. Yang, Jianghu is about Jianghu, and it's time for Kimen to give an explanation to our family. The bearded man took the symbol from his waist. Luo Ying, Aunt May, you. Mr. Yang glared angrily. After so many years, people are almost in the coffin. What 7 gates, what hatred, how many years ago? When they kicked off their legs, they didn't know if the ringing team was still there. It was really not worth going to war over this matter. Lao Yang. Seeing the angry look on Mr. Yang's face, Su Tong comforted him and said, Mr. Yang, I'm here even though I'm here. I'm not afraid of anything. Just sit down and rest. We'll talk again later. As he spoke, Su Tong put away the demon bell and looked at Sun Sheahu in front of him. How do you want to explain? Back then, your master asked my old lady to die in a foreign country. Now in the era of rule of law, I don't want your life. Just leave a pair of hands. I'll give you 5 million, which will be enough for you to have enough food and clothing for the rest of your life. How about it? Sun Sheahu stared at Su Tong's hands. The craftsman pointed at these 2 hands when he was eating. Even though Kimen has long existed in name only and paper makers have been eliminated by the times, the unique skills of these hands are still preserved. By leaving these hands and placing them in front of the old lady's tomb, Qi men would give an explanation to their family. Su Tong looked at his hands, raised his head and said casually, that's not possible, we can't lose the ancestral craftsmanship. Then it depends on your ability. Send him on his way. After Sun Sheahu finished speaking, bearded Luo Ying and Mei Jiga rushed to Su Tong at the same time. The 2 copper symbols looked like 2 blades, and they made a sharp whistling sound when they were swung. However, Su Tong seemed too naive. He didn't know much about martial arts, he only knew how to handle 5 animals and close combat. But his superhuman physique itself has special bonuses. In the eyes of others, Luo Ying's symbol swings were fierce, but even in the last script world, Luo Ying's strength was barely at the level of a third-rate practitioner. Not even as good as the boxers from those martial arts schools. Su Tong didn't even dodge, he saw the opportunity and lightly kicked Luo Ying down to the ground. At this time, Mrs. May flew up and kicked Su Tong, but Su Tong just stepped back and dodged, pinching his nose in disgust. Grandma, you should wash your feet. Dry tongue. The blow missed, and several young men around quickly pushed the 2 cowhide drums in front of Aunt May. 2 drumsticks struck, and a roar of thunder came. Boom, boom, boom. Chiang the drums sounded together, and Luo Ying followed suit and started clapping the cymbals in his hands. Su Tong stood there and watched, wanting to see how much magical power the inherited sounding team still had in today's world. However, he was disappointed. No matter how hard Meijigu and Luo Ying tried, the sound was already deafening. Some young people around him couldn't bear it and covered their ears, but he just felt that the noise was just too loud. Other than that, I didn't feel any discomfort. Is it possible that the inheritance from the past only has so little ability to play gongs and drums now? Su Tong smiled and looked at Sun Shaihua. If that's all, I don't think your family's debt needs to be settled. If it does, it won't be your family's turn. Arrogant. Sun Shaihua and others had an expression on their faces. They wanted to test the depth of this young man first, but they didn't want to make them a laughing stock. They were shocked and angry in their hearts. What was shocking was that they couldn't see through the depth of this young man. They only felt the difference between Luo Ying and Meijigu. Human temptation is like a stone thrown under a cliff, without even a sound being heard. What makes me angry is that this kid is too crazy. Even if he is Shuegui's disciple, is he still Shuegui? I saw Sun Shaihua squinting at Mr. Yang. Everyone is knocking on your door. Do you really want me to take off the signboard of our Sun family's loudspeaker class? When Mr. Yang heard this, his fingers trembled involuntarily, and he looked at the large character sign hanging in the living room, Qi Ming Jushan. This is a plaque kept by the Grand Master. It is said that at that time, in order to compete for this plaque, 9 sound instrument troops took turns on the stage. The Grand Master played until the end, and the Suana was stained red with blood. Now that Sun Shaihua said he wanted to remove the signboard, he meant to smash the plaque and end the Sun family class. Why? Mr. Yang cast an apologetic look at Su Tong and took the Changsheng from his apprentice. Seeing this, Sun Shaihua showed a look of satisfaction on his face, and then looked at Su Tong. Don't say that we bully you. This funeral song is not a praise for a person of high moral character, and if I give it to you today, it can be regarded as raising the price for you. Oh. When Su Tong heard this, he looked forward to it. Okay, but if you can't send me away, I want the Suana in your hand. Sun Shaihua was stunned for a moment. This Suana was passed down from his family, and it had extraordinary significance. But then he thought about it and found it ridiculous. If the 4 of them couldn't even deal with a young man, what's the use of this thing? Young man, it's still too late to leave your hands. Meijigu reminded that the funeral song is to open the way for the yin gods to send the souls to the burial. In ancient times, some special people were filled with resentment after death and could not be buried. There is a situation where the coffin cannot be lifted up no matter what, and even if it is buried in the soil, it will crack from the soil. At this time, a ringer class is needed to forcefully send him to the burial with funeral music. If he wasn't an extraordinary person with great evil and kindness, he might not be able to escape death. After all, Meijigu didn't want to kill anyone. She spoke now in the hope that Su Tong could retreat despite the difficulties. However, facing Meijigu's advice, Su Tong moved the bench aside and took out a handful of melon seeds from his pocket. Please start your performance. Court death. Seeing that this boy didn't know how high the sky was, Gugu Mei was heartbroken and hit the big cowhide drum in front of her with 2 drumsticks. The drums sounded loudly, and with the sound of the drums, a strong wind visible to the naked eye rolled up the leaves on the ground. Clang di, the copper cymbals and the changsheng sounded at the same time. As the music played, Su Tong was surprised to find a familiar breath blowing against his face. Between reality and fiction. He was nervous. He didn't expect that the patent of being a grand master could be presented in such a way. Wrong. This is not a complete illusion, but more like a fake. It's just a little stronger than the half-step master's illusory technique. So does this mean that even if you are not a great master, you can still show the difference between reality and reality through other means. For example, formation. Just when Su Tong's mind was wandering and his mind was racing with thoughts. When Sun Sheahu Suana sounds, this sense of picture becomes even more real. The shrill sound of the Suana seems to lead the rhythm of the entire song. Great sorrow and great joy, great rise and fall, great joy and great mourning, in the blink of an eye, thousands of years appear in the world. When you look back, it is just a handful of lois, and right and wrong are nothing but the disappearance of human life and death. A grey aura of death rushed towards his face. It was obviously still noon and the sky was bright, but people just felt that the cold wind was biting and their whole bodies were freezing. The young disciples who were standing by had already escaped from the door long ago. But there were also a few who were disobedient and clung to the wall to take a peek. As a result, their faces were all blue from the cold, and they felt like they had no energy left in their bodies even if they wanted to escape. Dingling, dingling. At this time, Su Tong suddenly heard the sound of chains clashing in his ears. When he turned around, he saw two little guys with sinister features, carrying chains, emerging from nowhere and running towards him. As he walked, he sang in his mouth. Gold ingots, silver ingots, and thin paper money are not too little. I close my eyes, kick my legs, and listen to the sound of the Suana for half my life. The two little guys were singing happily, and I don't know who intervened, red umbrella, white umbrella, let's lie down together after eating. Without regaining consciousness for a moment, he started singing along. Lie down on the board, sleep in the coffin, and then bury them together. Huh? Did you sing it wrong? Who changed it? The two little guys took a closer look and saw Su Tong squinting at them, not forgetting to wave to them. When the two little guys saw this, they couldn't help but came over suspiciously. Just as he was about to speak, Su Tong took out a thick stack of guide money, waved it and threw it out. This is for you. The large piece of white guide money immediately made the two kids' eyes light up. They ignored Suana's instructions and started to fall to the ground to pick up the guide money. Sun Sheahu blew hard, and the veins on his forehead bulged high, as if he wanted to remind these two brats what they were here for. But the kid only had money in his eyes and ignored Sun Sheahu's instructions. If he could still curse at this moment, Sun Sheahu would have personally greeted the 18th generation of these two brats. I was even more surprised. I didn't expect that the young man in front of me was really a good paper maker. I saw stacks of money being thrown out by Su Tong. Like free snowflakes, the two little ghosts were lying on the ground, like puppies begging for food. Su Tong even only needed to take out a wad of money and put it in his hands, and the two little ghosts were already like it was as if he had cast a restraining spell, staring at Su Tong with wide eyes, waiting for him to spill the money. Su Tong looked sideways at Sun Sheahu, his contemptuous look making Sun Sheahu grit his teeth in anger and his eyes turned red. This time, the tune suddenly changed, from the original joy and sorrow to something brisk and sharp. As soon as the song changed, the surrounding temperature dropped again. I saw a huge ghost figure walking out of the darkness, opening its big hand and grabbing Su Tong head on. Infinite script killing. Author, Guo Shui Gan Xiao. Chapter 466. Mountain Ghost. Su Tong raised his head and said in surprise. The so-called mountain ghosts can be regarded as lonely wild ghosts, but they are not counted as such. Strictly speaking, there are even individuals that are independent from the ghost system. He died in vain in the mountains and got the essence of the mountain by chance, blended with the aura of the mountains and forests, and became a ghost. It's hard to explain this clearly. If there are villagers living nearby and you meet him and worship him as a mountain god, he will really become a Shinto in a few years. But if the villagers don't believe him and think he's just a gorilla, he'll just look like this and he'll be like this for a lifetime of training. The ghost in front of me is the so-called mountain ghost. The figure resembled a mountain, with a human-like ape face and a body covered with black hair. At first glance, it looked like an oversized monkey. A burst of sharp laughter came out of its mouth, and its big hand fell down, shrouding the entire yard in shadow. Su Tong was a little surprised, but what surprised him was not the huge ghost in front of him. Instead, he felt strange why the mountain ghost could appear in the world without restraint in broad daylight. You know, even Amrita, the big devil, is very disgusted with Su Tong calling him during the day. In my impression, except for the enlightened Yang Shen, he can wander around in the void during the day. As for the other elves and ghosts, they are either like old immortals like Da Ya and others, who are in human form, or you need special treasures to protect you. Without these two specific conditions, people usually stay wherever it is cool during the day. This is just a mountain ghost in front of me. It has not yet become a god, but it appears in broad daylight. Isn't it afraid that the sun will shine on him and make him fly away? Could it be? Su Tong glanced sideways at the Suana in Sun Sheahu's hand in front of him. Seeing the strange light flashing on the Suana, Su Tong immediately understood and thought to himself, so that's it? I think the reason why the mountain ghost appears is probably due to the Suana. Money can make all the difference, but now I'm afraid you won't be able to come up with that much money. Sun Sheahu's face was gloomy, and he was already angry. Even if he had to risk his life, he would give an explanation to his old lady today. Old son, this is too much. Mr. Yang's face turned livid when he saw this. Killing for life, you are breaking the rules. Times have changed, and the ringer class will be disbanded sooner or later. If I can exchange 7 words for someone's life in exchange for an explanation, I can be considered complete. Sun Sheahu's expression remained unchanged, but his heart was boiling with murderous intent. However, Su Tong looked at the big hand coming from above his head, and finally slowly raised his hands. After all, the ability of the prop card cannot be easily used in reality, otherwise the witness must be killed. As for Sun Sheahu's determination, he could only respond with one sentence. This stuff isn't worth the money. After saying that, Su Tong lowered his hand slightly. When they saw this action, Sun Sheahu and others were all shocked, because the lethality of Bai Shan Kao was so amazing that they, the older generation, had heard about Shuigui's attack afterwards. Time picture. But Sun Sheahu didn't believe that the young man in front of him would also worship Shan Kao. After all, when Shuigui died, people from all 3 religions and 9 schools confirmed that Shuigui's only disciple had not received the inheritance of Bai Shan Kao. This was one of the reasons why they allowed the descendants of Shuigui to live. Since the disciple doesn't know how to do it, how can the disciple know how to worship Shan Kao? But soon Sun Sheahu and others were shocked by the scene before them. As Su Tong clasped his hands and bowed gently to Shan Gui's palm suddenly cracked, shattered, and disappeared into ashes in the horrified eyes of Sun Sheahu and others. Before the mountain ghost could scream, the world in front of him suddenly changed. A crack ripped open from behind Su Tong. The crack expanded rapidly and swallowed up the entire courtyard. Under a huge abyss, on both sides are palaces from countless eras crisscrossing each other. The terrifying aura makes the mountain ghost feel like a powerful enemy. Rumble, rumble. Immediately after the crack, a Yin soldier roared out, forming a sharp arrow and heading straight towards the mountain ghost. Although the mountain ghost is big, it is completely vulnerable to this Yin soldier. With a swing of the spear, the chest of the mountain ghost is cut into pieces in an instant. The mountain ghost resisted for a few times, but in the end he didn't even touch a finger of the Yin soldier. Instead, the iron rope thrown by the Yin soldier caught his shoulder and fell involuntarily behind him. Hey, what a pity. Su Tong looked at the number of Yin soldiers and couldn't help but feel a little regretful. In the last script, Taoist Sun Long, a double dragon evil was created. At that time, the cavalry wearing Ming army armor looked like the elite among the elite. But at that time, I was only focused on dealing with Taoist Sun Long, and I didn't have time to get this iron cavalry in my bag, so I missed the opportunity. Otherwise, the Yin soldiers under his command should be even stronger now. How can this be? Seeing the Yin soldiers rushing out in front of him, Sun Sheahu fell to the ground with a plop as if he was struck by lightning, his face as white as paper. Meijigu, Luo Ying, and even Yang Lao were also frightened. He stared blankly at the roar of the Yin soldiers in front of him, throwing iron ropes to drag the mountain ghost to the ground and trample it repeatedly. The two little ghosts on the side were already trembling with fear. If ghosts didn't know how to pee, they would have peed their pants by now. Even though Su Tong didn't mean to kill anyone, the biting wind howled, making Mr. Yang and others feel that a disaster was imminent. They and others were like ants pinched by a giant on the tip of his finger, even if the giant didn't care. A mere pinch in time is enough to make them crumble and become ashes, never to be reincarnated. Big, big, Grand Master. The Changsheng in Lao Yang's hand fell to the ground, and these three words seemed to have been shouted out with all his strength. Meijigu and Luo Ying trembled all over, swallowing a mouthful of spit with dry mouths. Since then, Shuigui has been guarding Bamang Mountain alone. With his single move of worshipping the mountain buckle, he has scared everyone in the world. Even Li 11, one of the masterminds of the incident, was killed. The fragments of the immortal treasure also fell into Shuigui's hands, and Shuigui was soon assassinated and fell into the legendary evil magic stake, and eventually died tragically in Luoyang. Later, it was said that several great masters of the three religions also passed away one after another. From now on there will be no master. Even half a grand master is rare. A few years ago, the 70-year-old Taoist priest Hongqing of Wudang Mountain died in a lightning strike. The incident caused considerable turmoil in the circle. It is said that before his death, the Taoist priest climbed to the golden summit of Wudang late at night and practiced swordplay on the top of the Hall of Supreme Harmony. At the end of the training, he screamed with grief and anger, complaining about the unfairness of heaven, but his spiritual bones were born in the wrong era. He pointed his sword at the sky and cursed the sky for being blind. Maybe the scolding was a bit too harsh. God felt that he couldn't lose face, so he happened to have a thunder and lightning strike, killing the person. There are two completely different attitudes towards this matter in the circle. One is to feel sad from the bottom of my heart that even a Taoist family like Wudang, which has been passed down for thousands of years, cannot break the curse of the times in the end. Not to mention other aliens. The other one was completely sneering, thinking that this old guy was possessed by his own whims. In this era, we are still so superstitious. The so-called Grand Master is just a cover. Regarding the ending of this Taoist priest, I can't help but feel a bit of ridicule. Unfortunately, Sun Sheahu is the latter. He feels that people have to accept their fate. Times have changed and they should adapt to the times. The Grand Master is just a legend. But what he never expected was that the young man in front of him who inherited the yin scene would actually break the curse of this age of Dharma. For a time, everything about revenge and settling scores were all jokes. As Sun Sheahu said just now, this guy is so arrogant, do you think he is Shuigui? Now the slap of reality has made them clearly realize that Shuigui may no longer be there, but he is not someone who will follow him. In horror, I saw a yin soldier suddenly fixated his eyes on the suana in Sun Sheahu's hand, waved the reins, and galloped towards him. Phew! The black-grey horse was whipped up by a biting wind, and in an instant it was on top of Sun Sheahu's head. The horse's hooves stood up and kicked Sun Sheahu's head. Don't want. Yang Lao and the other three screamed sharply when they saw this. Fortunately, the horse's hooves stopped. Sun Sheahu could even clearly see the fluorescent bones under the rotting skin of the horse in front of him, as well as the rotting stench, which seemed to be telling a story. The process of death. Don't kill people, let's discuss things. Yang Lao's heart was about to jump into his throat. As for Meijigu and Luo Ying, they became completely mute. They no longer had the domineering demeanor just now. They were more like cats that had fallen into the water, hiding aside in embarrassment. They know that even the laws of the human world cannot control a grand master who is like a land god. Su Tong nodded, and Su Tong stepped forward. Under Sun Sheahu's horrified gaze, he stretched out his hand, as if plucking a flower, and gently lifted the suana in his hand into the palm of his hand. I'm afraid you are not qualified to settle this account. Su Tong played with the suana in his hand and looked at Sun Sheahu, who looked ashen with a half-smile. Immediately, with a wave of his hand, the Yin soldiers in front of him immediately turned back. Of course, the mountain ghost who was dragged to the ground was also dragged back into the abyss. Judging from its size, it might be able to guard the gate and guard the courtyard for master, so that would be no problem. For a moment, the haze in front of them disappeared, and everyone felt warm. They had never felt that the winter sun could be so warm. Oh, I'm hungry. Mr. Yang, you said you have to take care of the food. Let's eat first. Su Tong turned his head and looked at Mr. Yang with a smile. Ah, yes, eat, please, please come over here. Yang Lao was startled, his mind was still muddled, and he only remembered after hearing Su Tong's words. He nodded hurriedly, and used honorifics unconsciously when speaking, and led Su Tong to the restaurant. Only after Yang Lao and Su Tong left did Sun Sheahu and the other two people fall to the ground. They were already covered in cold sweat at this moment. Sun Sheahu stared blankly at the plaque above his head, with a complicated expression on his face for a moment. Who would have thought that in this era, there would be a great master, and he is still so young? At this moment, Sun Sheahu could finally understand the grief, anger, and aggrieved feeling in Taoist Wu Dang Hunking's heart, which was suffocating and despairing. Heaven, you are so unfair. You are listening to novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. Infinite Script Killing. Author, Guo Shui Gan Xiao. Chapter 467. Balu, Balu. Sun Sheahu was still complaining about the injustice of the world, while Su Tong had already started to eat a big bowl of noodles. The taste is actually very average, and the toppings are also simple stir-fries. But the advantage is that the noodles are rolled out by hand and have a solid texture. This makes Su Tong miss Grandma Li's handmade noodles. In addition to noodles, Mr. Yang also specially asked the cook in the kitchen to cut braised beef for Su Tong, and also brought out the best wine. They were entertained with good wine and good food, but their expressions were no longer as casual as before. After all, it wasn't Su Tong's performance that was so amazing. Mr. Yang never imagined that one day a great master would appear in front of him. What was even more terrifying was that just 10 minutes ago, Sun Sheahu actually tried to save his life. Thinking of this, Mr. Yang was already breaking out in cold sweat. He sat next to Su Tong, neither standing nor sitting, for fear that Su Tong would put down his bowls and chopsticks and say, "Eat and drink enough, to send you on your way." If this is really the case, their Sun family's ring instrument class will be in catastrophe, and it will be difficult for gods to save them. After all, looking at the 3 religions and 9 streams, there is currently no great master. Of course Su Tong saw Mr. Yang's nervous expression. In fact, he had no intention of taking action against the Sun family's ringer class. It was not his character to slaughter a group of weaklings. Besides, the cause of this incident is itself a cause and effect that was determined early. From the day he became a disciple, he should naturally bear the consequences left by his master Shuigui. It's just a matter of numbers, and I don't intend to kill anyone, but when I see Mr. Yang sitting on pins and needles, I feel funny, but I don't point it out, and let them be nervous first. He continued to eat noodles and drink wine until he was full. Su Tongke looked at Mr. Yang in surprise. "Hey, Mr. Yang, Why don't you eat? You're welcome, you're welcome. I'm old and don't eat much. Yang Lao waved his hands repeatedly and said. Su Tong nodded, took out the hookah pipe and tobacco, picked up a handful of tobacco and slowly rubbed it between his fingers. Let's talk about our business. Tell me, what's going on with that red coffin? Having said this, Mr. Yang did not dare to hide anything this time. After thinking for a moment, he said, do you know there is such a saying, a century-old dynasty, 1,000-year chieftain, 100,000 mountains and a 10-year kingdom? Su Tong shook his head. The first two sentences were easy to understand, but he didn't understand the last sentence. What is the kingdom of 10,000 years? 10,000 years is an exaggeration, but 1 or 2,000 years is definitely there. Mr. Yang explained that the saying is actually widely circulated. When they were still herding cows, they heard the saying from their elders. It means that during the hundreds of years of human dynasty, the chieftains in the mountains have been passed down from generation to generation for thousands of years, but there is a more mysterious place in the Shiwen Mountains that has existed for an unknown period of time. There is no record of it in history. I can't find any source, but it exists. Not many people know this sentence nowadays. In fact, there were a few more sentences after that, but Mr. Yang himself couldn't remember them clearly. The so-called red coffin is said to be the ticket to this mysterious place, where there is a yin-yang mountain. There are two evil spirits on the mountain. Anyone who is not buried in the red coffin will be eaten by the evil spirits. After passing yin-yang mountain, you can reach the kingdom of 10,000 years. After hearing Mr. Yang's explanation, Su Tong raised his eyebrows slightly, looked at Mr. Yang up and down and said, then what do you think? I don't know, maybe it really exists, but it is definitely not an orthodox place. I did hear it when I was a child. The chieftains in the past would sacrifice to the mountains every few years, bringing real gold, silver, gold, jade, and even jewelry. The boys and girls were sent into the mountains, and after each sacrifice, all requests were granted. Basically everything Yang Lao could say was explained. But what he knew was limited after all. There was even a special power invisibly shrouded in the red coffin, and Mr. Yang didn't know about it either. Therefore, Su Tong did not intend to delve into this issue any further. He slowly put the hookah pipe in his mouth and played with the suana in one hand. This suana has been around for some years, and you can see a thick layer of translucent patina on it. After holding it in his hand and playing with it for a while, he felt that it was quite heavy. He looked at Mr. Yang sideways and said, I'll do a magic trick for you. After speaking, he stretched out the suana in front of Mr. Yang, and then with a twist of his fingers, the suana disappeared out of thin air. Yang Lao was stunned for a moment when he saw this, but he didn't show much surprise. In an era when great masters have become extinct, even if you say that a grand master is a god, Yang Lao will believe it. Su Tong smiled and glanced at the description of the item in the prop book. I found that this thing still needs to be appraised, but it can be inferred that this thing should be a heritage item of the ringer class. After thinking for a moment, Su Tong took out the suana. At this time, Sun Xiaohua and 3 other people, as well as the young men just now, all walked in. Sun Xiaohua knelt down in front of Su Tong without saying a word. Mei Jigu and Luo Ying followed suit and also knelt down. The few young people behind didn't know what was going on, but when they saw Sun Xiaohua kneeling down, they also knelt down. It's my fault alone. Please be noble and don't involve my children. Yang Lao's face changed slightly when he saw this, but he didn't stop him. He just looked at Su Tong, hoping that for the sake of his old face, he could spare them. It's not that they haven't thought about escaping, but if they can, the monks can't escape from the temple. The place really wants to kill people. With the unpredictable methods of ghosts and gods, there are many ways to kill them cleanly without leaving any traces. Even a top-notch police detective would be unable to find a shred of evidence. Su Tong said nothing and continued to smoke slowly. Looking at Sun Sheahu, who no longer had any dignity in front of him, his eyelids gradually turned into a gap and he asked, "If the person kneeling on the ground today was me, would you let me go?" Upon hearing this, Sun Sheahu clenched his fists and his eyes became confused for a moment. "Yes, definitely." Seeing that he was silent, Mr. Yang quickly spoke and assured, he just wanted to vent his anger for the old lady, and he had no intention of killing anyone. If it was Mr. Yang, Su Tong would definitely believe him, but Sun Sheahu was different. In order to deal with him, he even recruited mountain ghosts at any cost. If I didn't have Beishinko and my strength was inferior, it would really not be an easy task to deal with him. Sun Sheahu seemed to know that he was in the wrong. He was already very old and wanted to find another reason for himself, but he blushed for a moment and didn't know how to quibble. "Hey, I don't have to kill you, but let's make a deal." Seeing Sun Sheahu's flushed face, Su Tong's smile grew stronger for a moment, and then he glanced at the young people behind them. He glanced left and right and suddenly noticed the most inconspicuous little fat man. The little fat man looks very honest and honest. He looks like he is 11 or 12 years old. He has a chubby face and a big crew cut. He looks like a fool. His father is so stupid that he opens the door for a fool. Su Tong waved to the little fat man. The little fat man didn't know what was going on, but at this moment everyone's eyes were focused on the little fat man. Sun Sheahu didn't know what Su Tong was going to do, and he was so nervous that cold sweat broke out on his forehead. Su Tong brought the little fat man closer, measured it up and down for a moment, showed a very satisfied expression, and handed the suana in front of the little fat man. "What's your name?" "Clan Security." The little fat man looked at Su Tong nervously. "Give it to you." Everyone was stunned and didn't know what Su Tong was going to do. The little fat man didn't know whether he should take it or not, so he could only look at Sun Sheahu. Seeing this, Su Tong couldn't help but put the suana into the little fat man's hand. Then he said to Sun Sheahu, who was aside, "You can pass on all your skills to this little fat man. I'll give you 20 years. After 20 years, if this little fat man can't become a grandmaster, don't even think about living." The smile on Su Tong's face became brighter and brighter, but anyone could feel the fierce murderous aura. When Sun Sheahu and others heard this, they were instantly dumbfounded. Not to mention Sun Sheahu, even the cheerful Mr. Yang frowned. This little fat boy was none other than the eldest grandson of their family, but Sun Sheahu didn't like this lazy and stupid child from the bottom of his heart, and the child also had hearing problems. Perhaps it was precisely because of his poor hearing that the child had been clumsy since he was a child. In addition, he loved to eat, which made him chubby since he was a child. Therefore, Sun Sheahu never thought of letting his eldest grandson inherit the mantle. On the contrary, he valued another child, Ziyuan's cousin. That child had an aura at first glance, and it was obviously the best one to inherit the mantle. Who would have thought that Su Tong had decided on this matter now, and would also make a 20-year agreement? If you want a hearing-impaired person to become a musical instrument master, it is no less difficult than if you want a blind man to win a shooting gold medal, not to mention that Su Tong is still a master? How is this possible? Sun Sheahu even had some doubts. Was this an excuse for Su Tong to deliberately destroy their family? In 20 years, they did not dare to expect that the young Su Tong in front of them could advance to the coffin before them, not to mention that the Grand Master's lifespan itself was unusually long. "Hey, it's settled." Su Tong slapped his thigh, as if he had agreed on the matter with Sun Sheahu. 20 years later, I will come again. No matter if you are here or not, this little fat man must wait for me here." After saying that, he didn't forget to pull off a piece of Sun Sheahu's hair, hold it on his finger and shake it. "Just because of your hair, if anyone in your family wants to run away, I can find him even if it's the end of the world come out." After saying that, he strode out of the door. Yang Lao hurriedly chased him out, but when he walked out of the door, Su Tongren was already far away. Headmaster, 20 years is a bit short, isn't it? Even if this little fat guy has a good destiny, if he wants to become a Grand Master. On the way back, Daya lay down on the chair at the entrance of the hall and turned into a girl, playing with her furry tail with a lazy look on her face. In fact, she also saw that the little fat boy was the real treasure of the Sun family. He was reserved and quiet, but he was already a blockbuster even if he didn't sing. He looked silly but he had a delicate heart. Thinking of the little fat man's fat body, Daya couldn't help but swallow her mouth and spit. But even so, how could the Grand Master be so easy to achieve? Not to mention that it is the age of ending Dharma, even moving forward to the great unification dynasty is not that easy. Grand Master doesn't necessarily mean this. Can't he be a music guru? As long as people recognize him, he is a guru. Su Tong has seen the fate of this little fat man. He is a typical late bloomer. He may not even achieve anything in the next 10 or 20 years. As the saying goes, it means that the mind is not clear. But if he were to be over 30 and reach his 30s, he would definitely be like a hidden dragon emerging from the water and make an astonishing leap. If the Sun family can really train patiently, this little fat man will never have the opportunity to create a world of his own in this field in the future. On the other hand, Su Tong didn't want the inheritance of the ring instrument to be cut off like this, leaving behind the 20-year agreement, just to torment old guys like Sun Sheahu and make him feel bad. When they thought about Sun Sheahu and the others who had spent 10 or 20 years teaching them, but were finally overwhelmed by this little fat man's stupid qualifications, and when they were already desperate, the little fat man suddenly had an idea, and the Diozi counterattacked. That scene, I still feel it. Just as I was thinking about it, I returned to the farmhouse. When I opened the door, I saw an old man lying on a rocking chair and looking at Su Tong with a smile. "You are back. The food is cold. I will heat it up for you." Infinite Script Killing. Author, Guo Shui Gan Xiao. Chapter 468. Oh, we had such a great time chatting that I forgot about time. No need to bother, I already had dinner at their house. Su Tong had a smile on his face and looked really happy. But when he accidentally saw the screwdriver under the table, his eyelids twitched slightly. Walking to the table, he picked up the screwdriver and started playing with it. He looked around and said, "Huh? Where is my friend?" I haven't told you yet. As soon as you left, a person came up behind you and said he knew you and was your friend. After the meal, the two of them went out, saying they were going for a walk on the back mountain. Xiao Su, the same goes for your friend. It's such a cold day that I feel cold even wearing a cotton padded jacket. He was also wearing a short-sleeved singlet. I see that your friend doesn't like to listen to advice, so it's hard to talk to him. You can talk to him when they come back, but don't get sick. Su Tong played with the screwdriver in his hand and patted his thigh after hearing the old man's words. Exactly, this friend of mine grew up wearing crotchless pants with me. Ever since he was a child, he has said that he would not listen to advice and advised him not to stab others for no reason. He did not listen. Guess what? What's wrong? The leg is broken. Broken. He didn't get out of bed for 3 months after being interrupted by his father. Su Tong raised 3 fingers and said exaggeratedly. But why do I see that his legs and feet are still quite strong? It doesn't look like they are broken. Don't coax me, kid. It's the 3rd leg that's broken. Of course you can't tell. Hearing this, old man's thighs tightened subconsciously. Hey, his father is a cruel man, can he do this? Su Tong sighed, there's nothing we can do about it. Who asked him to use that thing to stab others? I tried to persuade him, but he didn't listen. Well, this isn't a big deal. After all, pigs like to eat cabbage. Breaking, the third leg, is too much. The old man muttered. At this time, Su Tong stepped forward and took the uncle's arm. The smile on his face gradually faded, and he whispered, "Uncle, I advise you, will you listen?" When the old man heard this, his wrist tightened suddenly, and he was actually held tightly by Su Tong, unable to move. For a moment, the old man looked coldly at Su Tong's face, but he no longer saw the kind and friendly smile of the past, only eyes that made people feel strange. "Did I say something wrong somewhere, or did your friend leave some mark on you?" Su Tong shook his head and just held the screwdriver in his hand. "You are an excellent liar. I almost even believed your words, but it shouldn't appear here. This screwdriver." The old man was a little surprised. He didn't expect that what exposed his lie was just an inconspicuous screwdriver. Yes. I was also surprised that he would find this place, but I was even more surprised that this screwdriver would be left behind in this place. From the moment he walked in, he recognized this thing immediately. The old man's words were almost completely logical, and he didn't even find any flaws. According to normal reasoning, Gao Zhou found out that something was wrong with the other party, so he made an appointment with the other party to go out to solve it. There is no problem with this statement. But, this screwdriver shouldn't be here. He knows better than anyone else the special nature of this screwdriver, so if this screwdriver stays here, it must have its meaning. For example, I'm giving myself a warning. But the only thing he didn't understand was that whether it was his good brother or Gao Zhou, their methods could still be used calmly even if they faced a special team. The old man in front of him, who was nearly 70 years old, didn't look like a stranger, let alone a player. How did he subdue Gao Zhou and the two, and even force his good brother to leave his precious baby here as a warning to him? Snort. The old man snorted coldly and waved his hand to push Su Tong away. Su Tong didn't embarrass him and let go of his hand. The old man turned around and walked into the kitchen and put out the charcoal fire in the stove. As for the warm bowl of delicious food in the pot, Su Tong was naturally not lucky enough to enjoy it. After turning off the stove, the old man changed his clothes and said, "I wanted to wait a few more days for my granddaughter to get married before leaving, but now I have to leave early." Hearing this, Su Tong looked at the old man's head with doubts, and found that the destiny above the old man's head had also begun to change. It had changed from a bloody disaster to a misty fog. If you look carefully, you can see that there are rocks hidden in the fog. This is a sign of danger ahead. When you said you were leaving, where did you go? Go where you want to go. The old man's eyes were full of alertness and vigilance. Yin Yang Cave. I don't know why, but when the old man said this, Su Tong suddenly remembered the story told by Yang Lao. Every few years, a chieftain would bring sacrifices and go to Shiwanda Mountain to offer sacrifices. It is said that every time a person succeeds, his or her dreams will come true. Could it be that the reason why I first saw the old man's fate in the shape of a pine tree was because he was going to the mountain to offer sacrifices, and the location happened to be the Yin Yang Cave? You know what you're asking, young man. I actually like you quite a lot, but you shouldn't take advantage of my people's holy land. Su Tong knew that the old man might have misunderstood, but no matter how he explained it at this time, he could only wait and see what happened, and first find out what happened to Gao Zhou and the others. I saw the old man take out a small box from the cupboard. When he opened the box, there were all kinds of gold and silver jewelry, as well as the property certificate and an envelope that had been written long ago. These are the properties he intends to leave to his granddaughter. Unfortunately, the current situation means that it is no longer possible to hand it over to her. The old man held the box and placed the things on the table in the living room. Then he took out a set of clothes and put them on his body. The clothes looked very similar to the clothes of ordinary Miao people, but they were different in many details. A Miao knife was hung on the waist, and a silver horn hung on the waist. It was inlaid with many old gems. It didn't look like a modern product at first glance. This is the clothing of the old man's own tribe. Old man, there are 12 Miao tribes in western Hunan, which one are you? Su Tong leaned against the doorpost and asked curiously. When mentioning this matter, the old man looked disdainful, patted the horn on his waist, and looked like he was too lazy to explain to Su Tong. He just sneered and said, I am not a member of the 12 branches, but you may not know it after I tell you. Let's go, you two brothers are still waiting in the back mountain. The old man casually threw a satchel to Su Tong, which was full of dry food that had been prepared long ago. The old man himself put a machete on his back and led him out of the back door. Along a small road, heading straight towards the back mountain, there were occasionally some villagers on the road. They wanted to greet the old man warmly, but when they saw the horn around the old man's waist and the clothes on his body, his expression suddenly became strange. Su Tong could see the expressions of awe and fear in their eyes, but strangely, there was also a sense of disgust hidden under this emotion. The old man ignored these people and took Su Tong straight to the mountain. It was getting dark at this time, and the mountain roads were particularly difficult to walk at night. Even the hunters in the village would not continue into the mountains at this time. But the old man seemed to be very familiar with the environment here, and the night did not bother him at all. As for Su Tong, he had dark vision, so naturally he would not be affected. Not long after the two of them passed through a forest, Su Tong took a closer look and saw that there was fire flashing deep in the forest. Upon closer inspection, it turned out to be a cabin in the woods. The old man led Su Tong to the house and pushed the door open. The warm heat in the room rushed towards Su Tong and hit Su Tong's face. I saw a charcoal fire burning brightly in an iron stove in the room. Two figures in the room were squatting in front of the bonfire. When they heard the movement behind them, they both turned around at the same time. Head. As soon as Gao Zhou finished speaking, the figure beside him picked up the shovel and rushed towards Su Tong. Su Tong. Accompanied by a deafening roar, the sharp-edged face revealed in the firelight, isn't he the good brother he thinks about day and night, Chang Fujian. At this moment, his eyes were not wearing sunglasses, revealing a pair of scarlet beast eyes, with a murderous aura, wanting to tear Su Tong into pieces. But just as he rushed forward, he fell to the ground with a plop, his hand covering his lower abdomen, and his whole body was twitching in pain and breaking into a cold sweat. Gao Zhou on the side didn't dare to move when he saw this. After he tasted that taste once, he didn't want to try it a second time. Even a corpse-like body cannot withstand someone messing around in your belly. Su Tong glanced at the young man on the ground, took out a screwdriver from his pocket and threw it to him. Instead, he said to the old man aside, "Look, I told you that this guy didn't listen to advice." Ah! Even though the pain was excruciating, Jean Reniu still bared his teeth and claws at Su Tong, as if the guy in front of him had a grudge against him for killing his father. Su Tong knelt down and looked at the young man's distorted face. With a growing smile, he put his hand on the guy's head affectionately and looked up and down the young man's face with concern. "You have lost weight, but you are still as playful as you were when you were a kid." After saying that, a cold light suddenly appeared in his eyes, and he punched this guy in the face. Su Tong's punch directly deformed Chang Wogu's face. He rolled his eyes and immediately passed out. Gao Zhou looked at the two sideways and murmured in his heart, "What are these two crazy people doing?" Seeing this, the old man on the side held the handle of the knife with one hand and said to Su Tong in a cold voice, "Let's talk after we go in." After Su Tong walked in the door obediently, Gao Zhou couldn't wait to ask in a low voice, "You ate too?" Su Tong rolled his eyes at him, "If I eat it, none of us will survive now." Su Tong didn't know what the old man's method was, but from Chang Wu's state, it looked more like the rumored goo insect, and it was not an ordinary goo insect. Otherwise, with Gao Zhou's strength, he could kill the old man with one move. You are not afraid of the old man urging the goo insects. Su Tong sat down generously and wiped his hands by the bonfire a few times before asking the old man, can you make a condition? Hey hey. The old man actually sat down directly next to Gao Zhou. He was not worried that Gao Zhou would take the opportunity to resist him. He looked at Su Tong and said, on one condition, you will protect me into the mountain.